Chapter 1940. Her clear voice spread far and wide, landing clearly in everyone's ears. Many people were shocked. Chu Luiyue was openly declaring war. Moreover, she was challenging all the aristocratic families in the entire Divine Ruins world. Did she know what she was saying? After all, Peach Blossom Dock had just been taken over by her. Even if it had excellent conditions in all aspects, it was impossible to prepare everything in such a short time. There were many people in Peach Blossom Dock, but they were all mixed up and had their own camps. Even if Chu Luiyue had become the master of Peach Blossom Dock, how could she build up a powerful force that belonged to her in just a few days? Compared to the other aristocratic families that had been passed down for thousands of years, her force was simply too weak to withstand a single blow. She still dared to be so arrogant? They soon understood why Chu Luiyue had such courage. Because in the next moment, she raised her hand. The girl's hand was slender and fair, soft and boneless. It did not look threatening at all. Then, she waved her hand gently. Just a little. Whoosh, the enchantment of Peach Blossom Dock, which was faintly glowing, started to fluctuate violently in an instant. The sound of surging tides came from within. From this sound, it was not difficult to guess what kind of terrifying energy was contained in it. Nan Yifan's expression changed slightly. He had a bad feeling. His sixth sense, which had been honed by years of battle experience, told him that he needed to retreat immediately. But he hesitated for a moment. In front of so many people, wouldn't it be too embarrassing to take the initiative to retreat right after making a move? But it was this moment of hesitation. Boom! A terrifying surge of energy surged forth. A new round of even crazier strangulation began. Before Nan Yifan could react, he felt something tighten around his hand. He immediately looked over and realized that a translucent energy with a faint, gorgeous light had tightly bound his soul-devouring silver dragon spear. Nan Yifan knew that something was wrong and wanted to pull it back immediately. But he realized that he could not pull it back at all. Nan Yifan panicked. There was something wrong with this enchantment. However, just as he was filled with shock and suspicion, crack! The sound of something breaking could be heard. His heart shuddered as well. In the next moment, he saw a sharp barbed scale on the body of the spear shatter. Obviously, it had been forcefully crushed by the power of the barrier. Nan Yifan's heart was instantly filled with shock. The power of this barrier far exceeded his expectations. He finally realized that something was wrong. Seeing that the translucent power was still spreading along the body of the spear, heading straight for his face, Nan Yifan immediately let go of his hand, moved his feet, and quickly retreated. Crack! Almost as soon as he left, the sound of shattering rang out one after another. Inside and outside the barrier, countless pairs of eyes saw the shocking scene. Just like that, the soul-devouring silver dragon spear, which could be considered a top-notch divine artifact, was slowly being crushed by the Peach Blossom Cove's barrier. As the ripples on the barrier surged, the silver spear broke inch by inch and was finally annihilated into ashes. If Nan Yifan had been a step slower, he would have been in danger. Peach Blossom Dock's enchantment. How could it be so powerful? Someone in the crowd murmured in shock. They did not know that the Peach Blossom Dock had been rebuilt after its destruction. Now, the enchantment was covered with the power of the god-destroying tribulation, so it was naturally not comparable to an ordinary enchantment. Swish! Chu Luiyue raised his sword with one hand. He pointed to the front. Everyone, please. Digression, beginning of spring, I hope everything will get better as soon as possible. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1941. The sharp edge of the sword flickered with a cold light under the sunlight. A strong fighting spirit erupted from Chu Luiyue's body. Although there was still a barrier between them, Family E and the Nan family members who were standing outside couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Was this aura really something that a high god could possess? Nan Yifan took a few steps back and barely managed to stabilize his body. Although he dodged in time and wasn't injured, it was obvious that he had lost the confrontation just now. Moreover, it was in front of so many people. A high god powerhouse was actually easily stopped by a high god and even had his weapon taken away. It was simply a great humiliation. Nan Yifan stood there, feeling like he was in an extremely sorry state. He had never suffered such a loss in the hands of anyone whose cultivation was lower than his. He was shocked and angry, wishing that he could immediately rush over and kill Chu Luiyue. However, Nan Yifan was the head of the Nan family after all. He had been in a high position for many years. If he really didn't have a brain, he would have been pulled down long ago. How could he have come to this day? He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Previously, he had been stimulated by the deaths of Nan Yi and Nan Yuxing, and his emotions had been very unstable. Coupled with his lack of understanding of Chu Luiyue's strength, it led him to do so many stupid things under impulse. But now, Chu Luiyue had directly crushed the soul-devouring silver dragon spear and blocked his attack with little effort, which finally woke him up. It was obviously impossible for this to go on. Chu Luiyue's fighting strength was obviously far higher than he had expected. In other words, if he wanted to take down Peach Blossom Dock, he would have to pay a higher price. Nan Yifan's mind raced as he slowly exhaled. It didn't matter. The Nan family had sent 8 high gods this time, plus the 10 from family Yi. Their fighting strength would be extremely strong. Chu Luiyue could stop him alone, but could he stop all of them? Since you have said so, then don't blame us for being impolite. After Nan Yifan finished speaking, he crossed his hands in front of him. Vigorous origin power gushed out of his body in an unending stream. A dazzling purple light quickly covered his entire body. Purple cloud armor. Soon, his entire body was covered by the purple scale armor. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes slightly. This aura was strangely familiar. Then, Nan Yifan moved his feet slightly, clenched his right hand into a fist, and punched out fiercely. Purple cloud fist, break. Last time, he had used 70% of his strength. This time, he didn't hesitate to use his full strength. The fist wrapped in the purple cloud armor pierced through the air. The void trembled and collapsed one after another. A black spatial crack rapidly spread out. However, in the eyes of the people in Peach Blossom Dock, this scene was nothing special. They had already personally experienced the scene of heaven and earth collapsing, so why would they be afraid of this? It pales in comparison to a great one. The sword in Chu Luiyue's hand suddenly slashed out. A silver light blade quickly flew out. Chi! In the blink of an eye, the light blade cut into the barrier. When the crowd saw this, they were all at a loss. What was Chu Luiyue thinking? Was he planning to break the barrier by himself? However, in the next moment, everything that happened in front of them shocked them on the spot. After the light blade came into contact with the barrier, it didn't cut it open. Instead, like water, it quickly melted away. Then, layers of ripples appeared on the barrier. Poof! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the light blade rushed out of the barrier again. It went straight for Nan Yifan. Its appearance was too sudden. Everyone present didn't expect that Chu Luiyue's attack could be sent out in such a manner. Moreover, the aura on the light blade didn't weaken at all. It seemed to have strengthened. Nan Yifan was also taken aback. He had already sensed the astonishing aura on it. However, at this time, there was no reason to retreat. He clenched his teeth and madly urged the power in his body, pouring all of it into his fist. Clang! A crisp sound of collision was heard. The light blade struck Nan Yifan's fist with incomparable precision. Because of the protection of the purple cloud armor, Nan Yifan wasn't directly injured by the light blade. However, his situation wasn't much better. The impact of the light blade was too strong, and it directly shook his entire palm until it was numb. The power of both sides began to fiercely clash, devouring each other. At a certain moment, Nan Yifan turned his wrist. Whoosh! An ear-piercing scraping sound was heard, and sparks flew everywhere. Nan Yifan took a step to the side, quickly bypassed this power, and continued to move forward. His speed was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, he came in front of the barrier again. He changed his fist into a claw. Sharp purple scales covered his fingertips, and they were extremely sharp. He directly stretched out his hand, intending to tear the barrier apart by force. However, at this moment, he suddenly heard a sharp whistle in his ear. He turned around to look and saw that the light blade that he had just avoided had also changed direction at this moment and was flying towards him at lightning speed. Nan Yifan was shocked. It could be like this? However, he didn't know that Chu Luiyue had personally refined Scarlet Cloud Sword's soul, so naturally, it could do whatever it wanted. If one attack didn't work, it would come again. Nan Yifan didn't have time to think about tearing the barrier apart anymore, and hurriedly dodged. Although his speed was very fast, the light blade came too suddenly. He couldn't completely avoid it. The light blade flashed quickly, and instantly left a bloody mark on his left shoulder. Excruciating pain instantly assaulted him. Nan Yifan subconsciously looked at the wound on his shoulder. An inch-long scar could be seen on it. Flesh and blood rolled. Blood gushed out, and soon, his clothes were dyed red. Nan Yifan held it tightly, and finally couldn't help but shout, "What are you all still standing there for?" Only then did the people of the Nan family wake up from their dream, and they all moved out. Swoosh! 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 More than a dozen experts of the Nan family stood in the air one by one, facing Chu Luiyue, who was standing at the gate. Just as they were about to pursue, the light blade had already flown back and quietly merged into the barrier. The Nan family members missed. Nan Yifan's face suddenly became extremely ugly. Chu Luiyue was simply playing with them. The people of the family Yi were watching from the side. Yi Wentao had one hand behind his back, looking calm, as if he didn't intend to make a move. Many people of the family Yi looked at each other. They were not stupid. It was true that the family head came here for Peach Blossom Dock, but obviously, he had some connection with the Nan family. Thinking back to when Nan Yifan suddenly came to the family Yi, what the two talked about at that time, it was almost self-evident. However, the Nan family had already made a move. Were they going to keep watching? Jun Jiuqing suddenly took half a step forward and said, "Family head, I think, this time, we'd better end the battle quickly." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1942. Yi Wentao turned around and glanced at him. Oh. Peach Blossom Dock may not be a problem now, but they have many backers. The situation will only be more difficult to deal with. Jun Jiuqing said concisely. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but nod and agree. That's right. Big Brother, not to mention the Yuntian Tower, Shang Guanyu alone is difficult to deal with. The mythical beast she contracted is the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Just Chu Luiyue alone wasn't enough to scare them. But the key was that she did have an extremely powerful backer. If it was delayed until then, I'm afraid, Yi Wentao pondered for a moment. It was not that he had not considered this problem. From the moment he agreed to join forces with Nan Yifan, he had already anticipated countless possibilities and the various situations he would face. Naturally, this included these. However, since he had already made this choice, it proved that he had thought it through very clearly. He knew which was more important. Let's wait a little longer, he said. Seeing that he was still so calm, Yi Wenzhua and the others became anxious. Wait? What were they waiting for? At this time, wasn't the best choice to attack Peach Blossom Dock as soon as possible? However, no matter how everyone reacted, Yi Wentao's expression and attitude remained the same. Seeing him like this, no one said anything else. In the family Yi, almost no one had ever disobeyed his words. It was the same at this time. Yi Wenzhua frowned and wanted to persuade him again, but in the end, he chose to give up and sighed helplessly. He couldn't understand what his big brother was thinking. What was there to see if the Nan family and Chu Luiyue were fighting? Jun Jiuqing glanced at Yi Wentao and found that his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue. He seemed to be focused. He suddenly thought of something and followed Yi Wentao's gaze. What was he looking at? Or was he waiting for something? Everyone from the Nan family moved out and began to try to break the enchantment of the peach blossom dock. For a time, all kinds of colors intertwined. The rumbling continued without end. However, no matter how they tried, the barrier remained as stable as ever. Apart from a few ripples caused by the impact of the energy, there wasn't even a single crack on it. Everyone's expression gradually turned ugly. Those who had been criticizing Nan Yifan in their hearts at the beginning finally understood why he had returned in defeat the previous 2 times he had acted. There was something wrong with this barrier. The Nan family could be considered the top aristocratic family in the Divine Ruins, but even they themselves did not dare to say that their barrier was stronger than the one in front of them. Furthermore, it was clear that this barrier was controlled by Chu Luiyue alone. She could control the barrier as she pleased. No wonder it was rumored that Peach Blossom Dock is now Shangguanyu's territory. This barrier belonged to her and was under her control. Wasn't this the same as holding the entire Peach Blossom Dock in her hands? Was there anything she couldn't do? That's really strange. She's just a supreme deity. How did she do all this? I heard that there was a riot in Peach Blossom Dock and it caused a big commotion. Since then, it has been like this. I wonder what Shangguanyu did at that time. Everyone was puzzled. They were really curious. If we can't break this barrier, are we going to waste our time like this? That would be too embarrassing. At this moment, the sound of something being torn apart was suddenly heard. Whoosh! Everyone looked over, only to see that Nan Yifan had arrived in front of the enchantment once again. He forcefully tore open the barrier with one hand and reached inside. Digression, the computer was down for a while. Let's read more first. 7:00. I'll write down what I owe in a small notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1943. Nan Yifan was holding a short blade in his hand. The short blade was only as long as an adult's palm. It was purple in color and had a cold luster. It was extremely sharp. Almost silently, the tough enchantment was cut open. Nan Yifan was overjoyed when he saw this. He only wanted to give it a try, but he didn't expect to succeed. The opportunity couldn't be missed. Nan Yifan immediately mobilized more power and slashed fiercely. That crack was instantly lengthened. Without any hesitation, he entered in a flash. Hurry up! Everyone from the Nan family was also very excited when they saw this. They hurriedly rushed over, intending to rush in with Nan Yuxing. However, just as Nan Yifan entered the barrier, that long crack began to recover at an astonishing speed. It gathered together again. Ripples of light rippled, looking no different from the beginning. The Nan family members who wanted to follow in were immediately blocked outside and were given the cold shoulder. The few people who rushed in front tried to open the barrier again, but it was in vain. Nan Yifan heard the commotion and turned back to take a look. When he saw that the barrier had returned to normal in the blink of an eye, his eyelids twitched fiercely. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in his heart. Nan family head is really powerful, to be able to break my Peach Blossom Cove's barrier so easily. Chu Luiyue's smiling voice sounded. Nan Yifan suddenly realized something, and his heart sank. Oh no! He fell into a trap. He broke into this barrier alone, which was tantamount to a sheep entering a tiger's den. You! Cunning! Nan Yifan was enraged. Chu Luiyue was still smiling. You flatter me. Compared to Nan family head's temperament and methods, I'm still lacking. These words were mocking him for killing Nan Yi for Nan Yuxing. Nan Yifan's chest felt like it had been hammered by something, and he couldn't breathe. He stabbed with a backhand. Ripples appeared on the barrier, but it wasn't cut open like before. She did it on purpose before. Nan Yifan's heart was filled with hatred. He didn't expect that Chu Luiyue would still be able to use such a sinister move at this time. Seeing that the barrier couldn't be opened, Nan Yifan's mind raced and he quickly made a decision. Since I'm already here, I might as well fight them to the death. Today, even if he had to pay with his life, he would absolutely not let these people have an easy time. Nan Yifan's gaze slowly swept over Luo Yan and the others, full of resentment. These 4 people had all betrayed the Nan family. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have brought them along. If that was the case, Yu Xing might not have died. Nan Yifan's heart was filled with regret and anger. Finally, his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue. The culprit behind all of this was her. If looks could kill, Chu Luiyue would have been riddled with holes by now. However, she had been trained over the years, so she didn't take Nan Yifan's reaction seriously. Shengguan Yu. You do have some skills. However, if you think that you can look down on everyone and be the best in the world just because of these, you are too naive. Chu Luiyue explained sincerely. Patriarch Nan, you misunderstood me. I'm not an arrogant person, I'm just. I don't think you're worthy of my attention. What's there to say to an enemy? If she didn't kill them, they would kill her. She would never hesitate to make such a choice. Nan Yifan gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He knew it. He shouldn't have said so much to Chu Luiyue. Otherwise, in the end, he would probably die from anger before anything could happen. Arrogant to the extreme. Nan Yifan scolded sternly. If you really have the guts, fight with me. If you win, you can kill me or cut me up as you wish. If you lose. Patriarch Nan, have you been too sad about the deaths of your children that your mind has become muddled? Chu Luiyue interrupted him and asked curiously. You came to me to die, but you want me to fight with you alone? Why would I agree to such a request of yours? In this situation, Nan Yifan was doomed. That was why he said those words in a moment of desperation. But Chu Luiyue was not stupid. Besides, you're a god, and you said those words to me, a superior god. Patriarch Nan, even if you don't feel embarrassed, I feel ashamed for you. Chu Luiyue said with a faint smile. Nan Yifan's face turned red and white. He was really in a difficult situation now. Go back. The boundary couldn't be opened. Go forward. There were so many people there. Even if he was a god, he was no match for them. He was sweating profusely and his body was cold. Rong Xiu, who had been watching from the side, suddenly spoke. Patriarch Family Patriarch Nan has fallen into such a situation. Are you still not going to do anything? This sentence was as cold and indifferent as usual, but it instantly silenced everyone inside and outside the boundary. Almost everyone subconsciously looked at Yi Wentao. In fact, at this time, who couldn't see his purpose of coming here? Now that Nan Yifan couldn't even protect himself, he still didn't do anything. Could it be that he was just going to watch Nan Yifan throw his life away? Yi Wentao heard this and turned his eyes slightly. He and Rong Xiu looked at each other for a moment. That pair of eyes was like a calm pool of water, soaked with a bit of coldness that made people feel cold. Yi Wentao's heart moved. He was still afraid of Rong Xiu, however, at this moment, Nan Yifan suddenly rushed toward Chu Luiyue. He waved his hand, and the short blade instantly flew out. A piercing pain hit him in the face. Chu Luiyue's heart moved, and the armillary shield appeared in front of him. Yi Wentao's pupils suddenly shrank. Digression, today's update is overdue. Facing the wall to reflect on one's mistakes, a better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1945. However, at this moment, a green figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. At the same time, that person waved his sleeve. A palm-sized transparent jade bangle flew out from his hand. The next moment, everyone saw that the short blade that Nan Yifan threw out actually changed direction inexplicably and flew towards the transparent jade bangle. The closer it got, the slower its speed became, as if it had fallen into an invisible swamp. Ding! That short blade hit the inner edge of the transparent jade bangle, making a faint crisp sound, then completely stopped. Nan Yifan was shocked. When he threw this short blade, he used all his strength. Even if it couldn't kill Chu Luiyue, logically speaking, it should be able to leave a wound on her body. One must know that this short blade was no ordinary item. Even if Chu Luiyue had some ability, it would be very difficult for her to block it. In the end, not only did this thing not injure Chu Luiyue, but it was also easily dealt with by another person. At the same time, a tyrannical pressure swept over. Nan Yifan was forced to stop. He immediately looked at the person who attacked, his brows tightly knitted. Sun Yi. He remembered this person. This was Chu Luiyue's subordinate. From beginning to end, he had been following Chu Luiyue. Only when he went to escort Luo Yan and the others, he left for a moment. However, from these matters, it wasn't hard to see that he should be Chu Luiyue's right-hand man, and his status here wasn't low. It was just that, how could he be so strong? Nan Yifan's attention had always been on Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu. From beginning to end, he didn't even look at Sun Yi. Until now, when Sun Yi attacked. How could an ordinary person block his attack so easily? Nan Yifan began to carefully examine Sun Yi. However, Sun Yi didn't seem to care about this. With a flick of his wrist, he put away the transparent jade bangle. "Let me see that short blade," Chu Luiyue said. Sun Yi made a sound of agreement, handing over the dagger with both hands. Chu Luiyue carefully examined the purple dagger in his hand. After a while, he revealed a meaningful smile. "Patriarch Nan is really capable. You can even use the dragon scales of the great phoenix dragon race to make a weapon?" No wonder when Nan Yifan took out this thing, she felt that it was somewhat familiar. This dagger was made from the dragon scales of the great phoenix dragon race. However, he didn't know what method Nan Yifan had used to get his hands on this thing. Nan Yifan's expression was cold. "It has nothing to do with you." Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and played with the dagger. "You intended to use this thing to harm my life. How is it unrelated to me? Besides. Furthermore, this dragon scale was no ordinary dragon scale. It was hard to say what other secrets were hidden here." However, Chu Luiyue did not say these words out loud. Nan Yifan didn't intend to talk to Chu Luiyue anymore. His expression changed. After a short pause, he attacked again. From the looks of it, he was determined to kill Chu Luiyue. Sun Yi heard the commotion behind him and cupped his fists. There's no need to trouble Master to do such a small thing. Chu Luiyue thought for a while and nodded. "All right. I haven't seen you fight in a long time." At this point, she suddenly turned around. A youth was standing at the city gate, staring at them. Chu Luiyue waved. 13, come here." She had sensed 13's arrival just now. However, he was very sensible and knew that the situation was complicated. He didn't go forward and just stood inside to watch. Hearing Chu Luiyue's words, 13's eyes lit up and he immediately ran over. He didn't think about danger or anything. Master and Big Brother were both here. What was there to worry about? "Master?" 13 came over. He was still a little confused. He didn't know why Chu Luiyue had asked him to come over. Chu Luiyue raised her chin and gestured for him to stand beside the guards at the city gate. "All right, just stand there." 13 walked over obediently and stood still. "It's rare for your big brother to fight. It's a rare opportunity. You have to watch carefully," Chu Luiyue said with a smile. 13 was delighted and quickly nodded. "Yes." Chu Luiyue nodded in relief. This child was teachable. Besides, she also wanted to see how strong Sun Yi was now. On one hand, she could teach 13. On the other hand, she could solve the doubts in her heart. Finally, she could make Nan Yifan suffer a little. Why not kill several birds with one stone? Everyone was at a loss at first, then they were shocked. At this time, Chu Luiyue still had the time to think about this. Nan Yifan was also about to go crazy. The veins on his forehead were throbbing wildly. He only felt that he had been greatly humiliated. What did Chu Luiyue mean by this? She didn't like him? She didn't even make a move herself and only sent one of her subordinates. There seemed to be a flame burning wildly between his chest and abdomen. Nan Yifan instantly sped up again. Sun Yi turned around and looked at the rapidly approaching Nan Yifan. Then, he moved his feet and sprinted forward. From the looks of it, he was planning to fight Nan Yifan head-on. Most of the onlookers had complicated expressions. Chu Luiyue was too arrogant, and her subordinate had the same temperament as her. Who was Nan Yifan? The head of the Nan family. He was a top expert who had broken through to the god level decades ago. This Sun Yi looked to be in his 20s and was very young. Even if he had some strength, how could he be compared to Nan Yifan, who had combat experience? This was simply courting death. Nan Yifan quickly mobilized the power in his body. In fact, after experiencing those things before, he didn't dare to let his guard down anymore. This Sun Yi could take his moves so easily, which proved that he definitely had some strength. At this moment, he couldn't slack off at all. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to surge toward Nan Yifan. The aura on his body also became stronger. Sun Yi's long, narrow, and indifferent eyes narrowed slightly. But compared to Nan Yifan, there was almost no movement on his side. The distance between the two was rapidly shrinking. Nan Yifan suddenly stretched out a finger. A clear sound that seemed to come from the depths of the underworld came from afar. Underworld finger. His index finger had unknowingly turned a dark purple color, and a mysterious pattern vaguely appeared. At the same time, the Nan family totem flashed between his eyebrows. Sun Yi's expression didn't change as he directly punched out. Flowing wind fist. His fist was covered with a layer of green light that flowed slowly like water. Under the sunlight, it even sparkled and sparkled. His movements were swift and unrestrained like a gentle breeze, and it revealed an indescribable feeling of freedom. Then, the two of them clashed. Boom! The power of both sides fiercely collided. Violent and unbridled energy quickly spread out in all directions. A layer of intertwined green and purple light exploded, instantly enveloping the two of them. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1946. Almost everyone's gaze landed on the two of them, eagerly waiting for the outcome. However, there was one person whose attention was not on them. That person was Yi Wentao. After seeing Chu Luiyue summon the Armillary Heaven Shield, his heart was in his mouth, waiting for her to make a move. However, he did not expect that Chu Luiyue would not make a move. Instead, Sun Yi appeared out of nowhere and went against Nan Yifan. This made Yi Wentao's mood very bad. However, his expression did not change at all, and he continued to watch with an indifferent expression. Shang Guanyu's subordinate is not ordinary. He suddenly said. Of all the times to make a move, he chose to make a move now. Moreover, based on his previous observation, this Sun Yi's strength should not be underestimated. Yi Wentao frowned. I heard that Shang Guanyu brought him back from outside the Divine Ruins world. I didn't know that she had such a person by her side. Yi Wentao's eyesight was not weak. He had clearly seen how Sun Yi had received Nan Yifan's attack. He was certain that Sun Yi's strength was definitely not to be underestimated. However, the more it was so, the more sullen Yi Wentao felt. Chu Luiyue was really too strange. Not only was she always stronger than everyone expected, but even the people she brought with her kept showing up. Every time everyone thought that they knew her well enough, she would always do something even more shocking and reveal more trump cards. Who knew that this time, suddenly, a silhouette flew out from the intertwined ball of fire. Bang! His body fell heavily to the ground. There was a muffled sound. Everyone hurriedly looked over. When they saw that face clearly, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The person who was knocked to the ground was actually Nan Yifan. At this moment, he was lying on the ground, his face pale, and he kept vomiting blood. As for his index finger, it had actually been broken off. At this moment it was drooping at a strange angle, dripping with blood. He looked like he was in a very sorry state. Everyone was stunned, and they fell into deathly silence in unison. He originally thought that Nan Yifan would win for sure. Who knew that in just one round, he would be defeated? Immediately after, a green figure flew out from the ball of fire. Countless gazes looked over, yet they discovered that Sun Yi, who had similarly experienced an intense battle, was actually not stained by the slightest bit of blood. He floated in midair, and his green clothes were upright. The space between his brows was indifferent and cold, yet it revealed an indescribable icy cold noble aura. He looked down at Nan Yifan from above. Admit defeat? No one expected that the one to say this would actually beat Sun Yi. He was just one of Chu Liuyue's subordinates. If even he was so powerful, then Chu Liuyue, Nan Yifan struggled to stand up, coughing incessantly. Hearing Sun Yi's words, he spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood. How high and mighty were these 3 words? It was almost like a few resounding slaps on his face. Nan Yifan endured the pain coming from all over his body and looked up. A cold smile suddenly appeared on his face. Admit defeat? Dream on. As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly bit the tip of his tongue. The purple short blade in Chu Liuyue's hands suddenly cracked. Crack. Chu Liuyue quickly looked down. A dragon's roar suddenly came from within. Almost at the same time, the void beside Nan Yifan shook violently. A figure walked out from within. Nan family head, is there something you need from me? Nan Yifan swallowed a mouthful of blood and said word by word. Elder Fushan, you have to help me this time. Digression, it's time to compare whose backer is more powerful. Come at 6. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1947. Looking at Nan Yifan's miserable appearance, Miao Fushan frowned. What happened to Patriarch Nan? According to his identity, he shouldn't have been reduced to such a state. Moreover, to be able to force Nan Yifan to use the dragon scale and summon him here, it must have been a critical moment. As Miao Fushan asked, he quickly sized up everything around him. At first glance, he saw Chu Liuyue, who was holding the broken dragon scale in his hand. Then, he was slightly startled. This situation doesn't seem right no matter what. Nan Yifan's next words immediately confirmed his guess. Elder Fushan, the matter is like this. Sheng Guanyu and Rong Xiu killed my son and daughter, as well as several patriarchs of the Nan family. I originally wanted to lead people to seek an explanation, but I didn't expect them to be so cunning. They even bewitched the patriarchs of the Nan family who were previously detained and made them pour all the dirty water on me. Elder Fushan, all these years, I have never dared to disturb you, but this time, I really have no choice. Chu Liuyue was amazed. What was called inverting black and white? What was called a glib tongue? The evidence was conclusive, but he could still say such words. He was really not an ordinary person. Chu Liuyue began to understand how he could sit on the patriarch's seat for so long. As Miao Fushan listened, the expression on his face became more and more subtle. Only when Nan Yifan finished speaking did he nod his head. Then, he took a few steps forward. Everyone looked over with different expressions on their faces. In the entire Divine Ruins world, there was only one Elder Fushan. The Great Phoenix Dragon Clan's elder, Miao Fushan. This was a well-known figure. It was rumored that his seniority was extremely high, and his position in the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan was very honorable. Even the patriarch would respect him. For Nan Yifan to be able to invite him, he was indeed a great backer. Even the people of the Nan family were shocked and at a loss when they saw this situation. They never knew that Nan Yifan had a relationship with Miao Fushan. With this person, even if Chu Liuyue's contracted magical beast was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, he should still be slightly inferior, right? Thinking of this, many people's eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. Nan Yifan wiped the bloodstain from the corner of his mouth and looked at Chu Luiyue with even more coldness and complacency. However, Miao Fushan's next action shocked everyone. He cupped his fists and bowed to Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. "Saint, princess consort, long time no see. How have you been?" His attitude was extremely courteous, and there was even a hint of familiarity. It was as if he was meeting an acquaintance. Nan Yifan's smile froze on his face. He looked at Miao Fushan in disbelief. He had invited him here to deal with Chu Luiyue and the others. But what was with this reaction? Rong Xiu nodded and raised his thin lips. "It's been a while since we last met. Elder Fushan is even more spirited than before." Chu Luiyue's eyes curved up. "Yes. It seems that Elder Fushan has been quite happy during this period of time." Miao Fushan waved his hand and smiled bitterly. "Don't make fun of this old man, you too. Some time ago, I was busy with the clan's affairs and couldn't get away. This old man couldn't even personally attend your wedding. I hope you two can forgive me." Mao Zhen naturally had to clean up Mao Yang's henchmen in the clan. Therefore, the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan was quite shaken during this period of time. He had just calmed down when Nan Yifan invited him over again. Rong Xiu smiled. "Elder Fushan is too polite. You are an elder. I should have taken you back to Divine Dragon Island, but I didn't expect to see you here before I could go back." While the three of them were talking, the onlookers were all stunned. Why did it seem like Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue had a better relationship with Miao Fushan? The more Nan Yifan watched, the more panicked he became. He faintly felt that he seemed to have missed something important. The entire Divine Ruins world knew that Rong Xiu and Nan Yifan had dealings with the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. After all, Patriarch Mao Zhen had personally gone to congratulate them on their wedding. But Nan Yifan had always thought that they were at most acquaintances and were far from close. After all, the Great Phoenix Dragon clan had always been arrogant and rarely had any dealings with the human race. But now, yes. I didn't expect Elder Fushan to be familiar with Patriarch Nan. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Miao Fushan sighed in his heart. "It's a long story. Many years ago, this old man had the chance to meet the Nan family head. At that time, I was in a dangerous situation and Patriarch Nan helped me out. Therefore, I left behind a dragon scale as a token and promised that if Patriarch Nan needs any help in the future, he can just shatter this dragon scale. In other words, there was only one chance like this. But this time, it was enough to make many envious and jealous. After all, this was Miao Fushan. It was difficult for many people to see him, let alone others. But Nan Yifan could ask for his help. Even if it was thousands of miles away, Miao Fushan would immediately rush over. The gap between them wasn't small at all. Nan Yifan knew how precious this opportunity was, so he had cherished it all these years and had never used it. Until this time, when he was forced into a corner and had no way out, he finally used this trump card. But now, it seemed that the development of the matter had deviated from the direction he had expected. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and looked at Rong Xiu. No wonder, logically speaking, a person like Miao Fushan would not have any contact with Nan Yifan. It turned out that there was such a reason. I just didn't expect to meet the two of you this time. Miao Fushan also did not expect to face such an awkward situation. Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Then, Elder Fushan, do you plan to help Patriarch Nan? This question was the question in everyone's mind. For a moment, there was silence inside and outside the field. Everyone was waiting for Miao Fushan's answer. His choice, to a large extent, would determine the direction of today's matter. Miao Fushan smiled helplessly. Princess, don't tease me. I don't care about others, but the two of you. I can't beat you. If the Patriarch were to find out about this, he would definitely be furious. This sentence was a clear indication of his attitude. Nan Yifan suddenly became anxious and hurriedly took a few steps forward. Elder Fushan? What do you mean by this? He was the one who invited him here first, and it was clearly an agreement made many years ago. But in the end, Miao Fushan was still standing opposite those people. Miao Fushan stroked his beard helplessly. Patriarch Nan, you've really made things difficult for me this time. If it was any other matter, I would naturally be duty-bound, but this time, I really can't do it. Nan Yifan wanted to explain, but he continued. Princess is already half a family member of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. How can you beat her? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1948. Each and every word echoed clearly in everyone's ears. It was like a thunderclap. Everyone was stunned on the spot, unable to regain their senses for a long time. They almost thought that they had misheard. Half a family, half a family. Who exactly was Chu Luiyue? What kind of ability did he have to make Miao Fushan say such words? Nan Yifan was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Miao Fushan with a shocked expression. He opened his mouth, but the thousands of words in his throat could not come out. Miao Fushan said. This old man does owe Nan family head a favor, but how can I beat up my own family for an outsider? Nan family head, don't you think so? If Miao Fushan's previous words were tactful, then this sentence completely cut off the last trace of hope in Nan Yifan's heart. Family. Outsider. It was clear who was close and who was distant. This time, this old man has let Nan family head down. So if Nan family head needs any help in the future, just ask, and this old man will do his best to help. But this time, please forgive this old man, I really can't help. Miao Fushan said. As compensation, the previous one help will be changed to 2. What do you think, Nan family head? What do you think? He had already made his decision, so why was he still asking for his opinion? Nan Yifan sneered in his heart. Would Miao Fushan take back his words if he said no? More importantly, if Miao Fushan did not help, then he, Nan Yifan, might not even be able to live past today. Even if he had 2, 3, or even more opportunities, what was the use? Ridiculous. At this moment, Nan Yifan's limbs were cold, but his chest was boiling hot, as if something was rushing back and forth in his lungs, and was about to burst out. A warm, sweet, and fishy taste suddenly surged up his throat. He forced it down. There had never been a moment like this where he felt like a clown. Miao Fushan's words were like a slap to his face, and it was burning with pain. At this time, the people standing outside the barrier were not any better than Nan Yifan. Miao Fushan said. Chu Luiyue was a member of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. She was a human. More importantly, her contracted mythological beast was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It might make sense if she was half a member of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, but as for the Great Phoenix Dragon, in the entire Divine Ruins world, who didn't know that the relationship between these 2 primordial divine beast clans had always been very subtle? On the surface, everyone seemed to be minding their own business, but in reality, they were all openly and secretly competing against each other. The Great Phoenix Dragon actually treated Chu Luiyue as one of its own. Did they even consider the existence of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? Moreover, why hadn't they heard anything about such a big thing before? Even Yi Wentao, who had always been calm, frowned when he heard this. Yi Wentao had been secretly paying attention to these 2 primordial divine beast clans, but he hadn't heard anything about them. Why would Chu Luiyue have such a close relationship with them out of the blue? What was more troublesome was that Miao Fushan's status was noble, and his attitude basically represented the attitude of the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan. If the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Phoenix Dragon came to support at the same time, then, at that time, it would be difficult to handle. Yi Wentao slowly clenched his fists. Chu Luiyue was actually a little surprised that Miao Fushan would say such a thing directly. Thinking about it carefully, it was probably because of Mao Zhen's attitude. Because of Zichen, she was indeed close to the great Phoenix Dragon clan. However, it was very rare for Miao Fushan to be willing to say such a thing. One could imagine that this sentence would definitely spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world. It could be said that they were standing behind her and supporting her openly. To the great Phoenix Dragon race, this was indeed an extremely important decision. Chu Luiyue never thought that others should help her. Therefore, she was actually very grateful that Miao Fushan was willing to do this. "Thank you, Elder Fushan." She sighed softly. Actually, what Patriarch Nan said earlier was not true. Following that, she briefly recounted the events that had transpired earlier. Originally, she didn't want to say much, but Miao Fushan's attitude surprised and made her very grateful. Therefore, she felt that she should tell the truth. As for who Miao Fushan believed, it was up to him. The more Miao Fushan listened, the tighter his frown became. By the end, his face was ashen. He suddenly turned around and stared at Nan Yifan. "Patriarch Nan, is this all true?" A trace of panic flashed in Nan Yifan's eyes, but he still said stubbornly. "Since Elder Fushan has chosen to stand on their side, why ask me this?" He put on a look of contempt and mockery as if Miao Fushan was going back on his word. But who was Miao Fushan? Nan Yifan's disguise was completely useless in front of him. With just a few more glances, Miao Fushan had already guessed his thoughts. His expression turned cold. It was no problem for Nan Yifan to ask him for help. It was also no problem for Nan Yifan to be the one in the wrong. But, he couldn't tolerate Nan Yifan lying. Nan Yifan felt guilty under Miao Fushan's gaze and subconsciously looked away. After a while, Miao Fushan said indifferently. "Patriarch Nan, since you helped me before, I won't pursue today's deceit. But from now on, between you and me, it's written off. Patriarch Nan, you'd better pray for yourself." With that, he flicked his sleeves fiercely and turned to walk in the direction of Chu Luiyue and the others. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. "Elder Fushan, it's a great thing that the princess consort can take down Peach Blossom Dock." A smile appeared on Miao Fushan's face. This matter had been spreading like wildfire in the Divine Ruins world recently, so he naturally heard about it too. He had long thought that the other families of the human race might take action, but he didn't expect that these two families would be the first to take action. And it just so happened that he was summoned here. Since it was such a coincidence, he might as well stay here and help. Since it's a wonderful thing, I naturally won't allow others to ruin it. Although this old man is an old bag of bones, but this little bit of help can still be of help. I hope the Holy Sun and Princess Consort won't mind. He said that he wouldn't do anything to Nan Yifan, but he didn't say that he would do the same to others. After weighing the two, he naturally had to help Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was also quite surprised. "What are you talking about, Elder Fushan? We should be thanking you." Although she had her own plan, Miao Fushan's willingness to help greatly increased their chances of winning. Nan Yifan almost fainted when he heard this. Digression. Come back at 7:00. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1949. After a long time, not only did they not manage to invite any helpers, they even had one more enemy. And it was an extremely powerful one. Nan Yifan felt that everything seemed to be a ghost when it came to Chu Luiyue. He had hidden this trump card for many years, and now that he had finally used it, it was ruined by Chu Luiyue with just a few words. He could not understand how Chu Luiyue managed to be on good terms with two ancient divine beast clans at the same time. Moreover, it was not just a normal relationship, but a close relationship that allowed them to help anytime and anywhere. Nan Yifan was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he would never have invited Miao Fushan over. But now, it was too late to say anything. Miao Fushan's appearance and declaration had caused a great change in the situation. If they had dared to give it their all before, they were now somewhat hesitant. The great Phoenix Dragon was a divine beast. Originally, Chu Luiyue had already contracted the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, which was already troublesome enough. Now, with the addition of the Great Phoenix Dragon, for Nan Yifan and the others, it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. Yes, Family E and Nan family's status and foundation were higher than those first-rate families. But compared to these two divine beast clans, they were still inferior. Not to mention that these two clans were even more powerful when they joined forces. How could they continue to fight? Family head, do you think we should continue? Someone from Family E whispered. The current situation was a little troublesome. Fortunately, they had not made a move yet. If they left now, they might be able to avoid this battle. Yi Wentao turned around and glanced at the person who spoke. His eyebrows moved slightly, and he said lightly, "You want to leave?" The person who spoke suddenly shuddered. No. Although the family head's expression did not change, there was an inexplicable coldness that made one's heart turn cold. The people around wanted to say a few words of agreement, but when they heard Yi Wentao's question, they suddenly stopped talking. After spending so much effort to come here, if we leave quietly, how can Family E establish a foothold in the Divine Ruins world in the future? Yi Wentao's voice did not fluctuate, but it immediately alerted everyone. Yes. Since he had already come this far, how could he leave just because he said so? Everything that had happened here today would quickly spread throughout the Divine Ruins as if it had grown wings. At that time, how would those people think of Family E? Furthermore, they had come here for the Peach Blossom Dock. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would be able to find such a perfect place again. No matter from what perspective, they could only choose to continue. Chi! A sound of air breaking suddenly came from behind. Nan Yifan suddenly came back to his senses, but before he could do anything, a cold green light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. He knew something was wrong, but there was no time to dodge. An ice-cold stab of pain instantly came from his lower abdomen. His body to stop his eyes. A bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared on his body, and blood was gushing out. His clothes were already stained with blood, but at this moment, a large amount of blood was gushing out, quickly soaking his clothes and sticking them tightly to his body. Furthermore, blood was constantly dripping down, making him look even more ghastly. Intense pain quickly spread through his body. At the same time, the rich force seemed to have lost control as it surged out of his body. Nan Yifan's mind went blank for a moment. His core of essence had shattered. He was almost forcing himself to look back. Sun Yi had appeared behind him without him noticing. A transparent jade bangle was floating quietly in front of him. It was the same one he had used to block Nan Yifan's short blade. However, the jade bangle was now stained with a few drops of blood, which were slowly dripping down along the arc on it. It was obvious that the wound on Nan Yifan's body was caused by this thing. Nan Yifan's eyes widened in disbelief and deep resentment. How could this be? When Sun Yi attacked, why didn't he sense it at all? If he had reacted earlier, his core of essence wouldn't have been shattered so accurately. Sun Yi looked at him with a cold and indifferent expression, as though he was looking at an ant. He clearly didn't say anything, but Nan Yifan could feel that Sun Yi looked down on him. Nan Yifan became more and more furious, but at the same time, he also felt great fear. He had to admit that Sun Yi's strength was indeed above his. From start to finish, the two of them had only exchanged 2 moves. Sun Yi had directly placed him in such a situation. Although part of the reason for this was because Nan Yifan himself wasn't alert enough, if Sun Yi wasn't strong enough, he definitely wouldn't have succeeded. What was more terrifying was that such a powerful figure was actually Chu Liyue's subordinate. He was willing to follow Chu Liyue and bow down to her. Why was that? Nan Yifan couldn't understand. But he was unwilling. Finally, his body couldn't support itself and fell down. Thud. His knees heavily knelt on the ground with a dull thud. This kneeling also directly smashed into the hearts of the Nan family members. For a moment, there was dead silence. Just then, a face suddenly appeared in Nan Yifan's peripheral vision. Yi Wentao. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. Yi Wentao narrowed his eyes slightly. Nan Yifan suddenly thought of something, and a ruthless look flashed across his eyes. Boom! A ball of flames suddenly exploded from his body. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1950. The flame was pure white, and as it burned, there were specks of silver light flickering within it. The flame burrowed out of Nan Yifan's body and quickly engulfed his entire body. In the blink of an eye, he became a flaming man. However, unlike other flames, this silver-white flame was not boiling hot. Instead, it carried traces of cold air. On the ground where Nan Yifan was, the sporadic drips of blood gradually froze and were covered with a thin layer of frost. Then, Nan Yifan stood up again. Through the silver-white flame, Chu Luiyue could vaguely see that Nan Yifan's body was undergoing some kind of change. He just stood there, allowing the flame to burn wildly on his body. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth continuously surged toward him and merged with the flame. As time passed, Nan Yifan's aura, which had been much more dispirited, began to gradually recover. Chu Luiyue frowned. Rong Xiu said. He's summoning his divine body. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then suddenly understood. His divine body seems to be a little different from others. The Nan family had always been a rather mysterious existence in the divine ruins world, so there were not many rumors about Nan Yifan himself. Outsiders basically had no way of understanding him. As for what kind of divine body he had cultivated, it was naturally even more unknown. Chu Luiyue had seen many types of divine bodies in the ancient books of Lingxiao College, but none of them were the same as Nan Yifan's divine body in front of him. In just a short while, Nan Yifan's aura and pressure seemed to be comparable to when he had first appeared. More importantly, his aura was still rising. After the silver-white flame burned fiercely, it began to gradually return to Nan Yifan's body. Only then did Chu Luiyue see that most of the wounds on his body had healed. Even the wound on his abdomen that Sun Yi had left behind had mostly healed and was beginning to scab. Chu Luiyue frowned. Nan Yifan's injuries were very serious, especially since his core of essence had been shattered. Logically speaking, he should have lost all his attacking power and could no longer fight. Who knew? At this moment, Nan Yifan raised his head and looked straight at Chu Luiyue. Only then did Chu Luiyue see that his face and neck were covered with a thin layer of frost. Looking from afar, he looked like he had turned into an iceman. A thin layer of frost penetrated through, revealing a bone-piercing chill. As for his eyes, they had turned silvery white. When she met that pair of eyes, Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly shrank. Cold, bloodthirsty, crazy. It was as if it wanted to devour everything. A trace of uneasiness suddenly welled up in her heart, and she immediately circulated the origin power around her body. Sun Yi waved his sleeve and the transparent jade bracelet rushed towards Nan Yifan once more. However, this time, Nan Yifan reacted immediately. He raised his hand and punched out. Clang! The incomparably hard fist fiercely collided with the transparent jade bracelet, emitting a clear and crisp sound. The transparent jade bracelet instantly flew out. And the ground beneath Nan Yifan's feet instantly cracked, causing his feet to sink in a little. However, his fist was unscathed. His body did not seem to have suffered any substantial damage either. One must know that his core of origin was already shattered, and he could not circulate his origin power at all. At this moment, he was purely relying on his divine body to support himself. Chu Luiyue frowned. Nan Yifan's divine body was actually this powerful? The transparent jade bracelet flew back, and Sun Yi raised his hand to catch it. Sensing the vibrations of the remaining power on it, his expression turned cold. Nan Yifan had already gone mad. He had directly given up on his physical body and used all his power to fill his divine body. In order to strengthen his divine body, he had even burned his remaining origin power. Doing so was no different from killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. Most importantly, this would cause him great and irreversible damage. He was going all out. Just as this thought flashed through Cin Yi's mind, he saw the last flame on Nan Yifan's body disappear. Then, with a tap of his foot, he went straight for Chu Luiyue. Nan Yifan was extremely fast. Chu Luiyue did not even have time to see his movements clearly before she felt a gust of cold wind. She focused her gaze and looked into Nan Yifan's silver-white eyes. A thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Nan Yifan seems to be targeting me. From the beginning until now, she had almost always been on the same side as Rong Xiao and acted together. However, Nan Yifan had always targeted her alone, especially when he attacked. Without exception, all of them were directed at her. Why was this? It could not be because of his so-called fear of Rong Xiao. After all, from the moment he decided to send Nan Yuxing and the others, he had already predicted today's outcome. That meant, he felt that she was weaker than Rong Xiao and easier to deal with? That did not seem right either. Rong Xiao was right beside her and could attack at any time. Moreover, when they barged into Peach Blossom Cove's barrier earlier, they should have already seen some of her strength. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed. Nan Yifan was trying to force her to attack. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Yi Wentao. Almost at the same time, Yi Wentao also looked at her. The two of them confronted each other silently. Chu Luiyue instantly confirmed the guess in her heart. There must be some kind of agreement between the two of them. That was why Nan Yifan was so reckless and wanted to face her head-on no matter what. Forcing her to attack. What does Yi Wentao want to see? What does he want to know? Chu Luiyue's mind raced. At this moment, Nan Yifan was almost in front of her. That biting cold aura was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. However, at this moment, rays of light suddenly flashed under Nan Yifan's feet. The rays of light were light green and about the thickness of an adult's finger. They intertwined with each other and directly formed a huge net that floated up. Nan Yifan took a step and wanted to avoid it. However, the huge net had already begun to close. At the same time, countless silver needles flew out from it and went straight for Nan Yifan. They covered the sky and covered the earth. Nan Yifan's figure was instantly enveloped. Nan Yifan originally did not care about these attacks because he was very confident in his divine body. Moreover, this time, he had used all his strength to raise the strength of his divine body to the maximum. But soon, he realized that he had been too optimistic. These silver needles and this huge net are not to be underestimated. Soon, his vision was occupied, and his whole person was trapped on the spot, unable to continue forward. At this moment, Cin Yi stepped forward. He slowly raised his hand and then clenched it. Intense pain instantly spread throughout Nan Yifan's body. Ah! Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1951. This scream was extremely mournful as it spread far and wide, instantly causing the expressions of everyone outside the barrier to change. Because they could clearly see that the green net had suddenly tightened and tightly bound Nan Yifan. At the same time, the countless silver needles on it pierced into his divine body. Although those silver needles were very thin, they were very long and extremely tough. If they pierced directly, even the bones would be pierced. Not to mention being pierced by thousands of silver needles all over his body at the same time. This kind of pain was simply not something an ordinary person could endure. Nan Yifan's divine body trembled violently, but the giant green net tightly bound him, making him unable to move. Everyone could only see that the silver needles that flickered with a cold luster had almost all pierced into his divine body, leaving only the similarly sharp tips trembling slightly. This time, there was no more dark red blood gushing out of Nan Yifan's body, and it stained everywhere. However, everyone still felt a chill in their hearts as they watched. This kind of pain was no different from torture. This Cin Yi, what a ruthless method. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but exclaim in shock. They could all see that there was something fishy about those silver needles. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to pierce through Nan Yifan's divine body so easily. One must know that his divine body was already considered extremely strong. But at this time, he was still unable to withstand Sun Yi's attack. You must first have the strength to do this. Yi Wentao narrowed his eyes and said. In the beginning, his attention was on Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. It was only later when Chu Luiyue called out to Sun Yi that he realized that this young man in green robes might not be simple. At this time, he could finally confirm his previous guess. This Sun Yi, not only was he a supreme god expert, but he was also one of the best among supreme god experts. Although Yi Wentao and Nan Yifan didn't have much contact, they still had some contact. Therefore, he had a basic understanding of Nan Yifan's strength. Not to mention the Nan family, even in the entire Divine Ruins world, there were not many who could defeat Nan Yifan. However, not only did Sun Yi gain the upper hand in the process of exchanging blows with him, it also looked like it was effortless. Even now, Yi Wentao was unable to accurately guess Sun Yi's true strength. In short, he was stronger than Nan Yifan, and not just by a little bit. How come he had never heard of such a person before? Yi Wentao realized that he had come here in a hurry. If I had known earlier, I would have investigated more. However, it was clearly too late to say these things now. If I remember correctly, that Sun Yi seems to be one of Sheng Guanyu's former subordinates. As for the others, how many of them are currently staying at the Peach Blossom Dock? Yi Wentao suddenly asked. Yi Wenzuo was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Jun Juqing reply. Yes. Only then did he realize that the question was directed at Jun Juqing. That's true. Sun Yi and the others came from outside the Divine Ruins world. Jun Juqing had stayed in the northern underworld for so long, so he should know more about them. Jun Juqing continued. She has a personal guard under her, called the 13U Guard. These 13 people were personally selected by her, and they only listened to her orders. Sun Yi is ranked first in the 13U Guard. Yi Wentao's brows furrowed slightly. Are the other members of the so-called 13U Guard as powerful as Sun Yi? There seemed to be waves in Jun Juqing's eyes. He smiled. How could that be? Digression. It was snowing heavily, and my hands were frozen stiff. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1953. There are 13 people in the 13U Guard. Sun Yi is ranked first because he is the strongest. Although the rest are also rather outstanding, they are still slightly inferior to Sun Yi. Jun Juqing said slowly. Yi Wentao thought to himself and felt that this was quite reasonable. However, since these people had been following Chu Luiyue since they were outside the Divine Ruins world, Sun Yi must be rather capable to have reached his current cultivation level. Either he had been a god in the past, or he had broken through after following Chu Luiyue to the Divine Ruins world. But no matter how one thought about it, these two guesses were somewhat unbelievable. How old was Sun Yi now? His strength was so valiant. How could it be achieved so quickly in a short period of time? By the way, Patriarch, I remember that there was a rumor that the third boss of Peach Blossom Dock City was also Sheng Guanyu's subordinate. Behind them, one of the elders who overheard their conversation suddenly thought of something and added on. That third boss came to Peach Blossom Cove a few years ago. He's doing business here and is doing very well. It was said that he had close dealings with the Black Sword sect here. But now, there was no need to think to know that the Black Sword sect had been destroyed. Not a single one of them had escaped. The people in the Divine Ruins world did not receive any news about this. The Black Sword sect seemed to have disappeared just like that, without a sound. If they had not been paying attention to the happenings in Peach Blossom Dock and knew that the Black Sword sect had always been here, they would have thought that Chu Luiyue had come here and taken over the place. That's right, that third boss is no ordinary person. The small space in Peach Blossom Dock's Qingshui cliff that contains many treasures belongs to him. The elder said. Otherwise, the Black Sword sect would not have kept him here for so long. Yi Wentao suddenly understood. So it's him? He remembered this person. It was just that when he had first heard the news, he had not paid much attention to it as he had placed more of his attention on the Black Sword sect. Later on, when he found out about the close relationship between the Black Sword sect and the Black Demon Cave, he gave up on the idea of making a move. Who would have thought that the next time he heard news about Peach Blossom Cove, Chu Luiyue had already become the master of this place. As for the Ink Sword sect, they had been completely wiped out. Yi Wentao looked ahead with a complicated expression. Could it be that Chu Luiyue was able to take down the Peach Blossom Dock so smoothly because of Third Boss and the others? If that was the case, then her subordinates really couldn't be underestimated. He paused and turned his head halfway. Do you know the origins of the 13 Yu guards in Shengguanyu? Jun Zhuqing lowered his eyes and shook his head. These people have been following her since a long time ago, and she was the one who found them. As for their specific origins and background, other than her, there shouldn't be anyone else who knows. Yi Wentao was a little disappointed, but he was not surprised by the answer. He couldn't help but glance at Rongxiu. From the beginning to the end, Rongxiu had been by Chu Luiyue's side, but he had almost never made a move. His intention was clear. Peach Blossom Dock was Chu Luiyue's territory. Everything here should be settled by Chu Luiyue and her subordinates. To put it bluntly, he had purposely given Chu Luiyue a chance to establish her authority today. It seemed that he was determined to make Peach Blossom Dock belong to Chu Luiyue, head of family Yi. A nervous and hurried voice suddenly sounded. Yi Wentao turned around. The person who spoke was an elder of the Nan family, Nan Hetian. This person was also Nan Yifan's confidant. At this moment, he looked very worried and anxious. He cupped his fists at Yi Wentao. Head of family Yi, for the sake of the long-standing relationship between our families, please lend a hand and save my family head. At this time, it was definitely impossible to rely on the Nan family's strength alone. Only with the help of family Yi would there be a glimmer of hope. Nan Hetian didn't want to ask so directly, but he was forced to do so. He really had no choice. He had followed Nan Yifan for several years and had always been loyal. Now that he saw Nan Yifan being tortured like this, how could he not feel sad? Moreover, he knew that Nan Yifan had secretly gone to family Yi. He knew very well that the two must have made some agreement. But for some reason, family Yi still hadn't made a move at this point. They even looked like they didn't care and were just watching from the sidelines. Nan Hetian was burning with anxiety. He had no choice but to ask for help directly. The people of the Nan family also looked over. Yi Wentao's gaze swept across these people's faces, and he sneered in his heart. In fact, among these people, there might be some who couldn't open the barrier. If the 8 venerables joined forces, there would be some hope. But they didn't do so. It seemed that the people inside the barrier weren't the only ones who wanted Nan Yifan dead. All these years, the internal conflicts of the Nan family had always existed, but they were suppressed by Nan Yifan and didn't show much. However, when it came to the critical moment, it was fatal. Seeing that Yi Wentao didn't say anything, Nan Hetian gritted his teeth and continued. If family Yi is willing to help, the Nan family will do our best to help family Yi take down Peach Blossom Dock. As soon as this was said, the expressions of the people of the Nan family changed. Everyone could see that Nan Yifan was on the verge of death. Such a person was destined to be unable to continue to be the head of the family. Even if they managed to save him, what was the point? There were people who didn't like Nan Yifan, and Luo Yan's words earlier had shaken many people's hearts. Nan Hetian was Nan Yifan's closest confidant. He was naturally willing to do everything to save Nan Yifan, but others didn't think so. So after he said this, the people of the Nan family remained silent and didn't say anything. However, all of Nan Hetian's attention was on Yi Wentao at this time, so he didn't notice. Yi Wentao pondered for a moment, then glanced inside the barrier again. Nan Yifan knelt on the ground, his body was tightly bound and twisted. Blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth, but he couldn't say a word. From the looks of it, he was in an extremely sorry state. Who would have thought that Nan Yifan, the head of the Nan family, would be reduced to such a state one day? Yi Wentao frowned. Unfortunately, he had overestimated Nan Yifan. He had wasted so much time. It seemed that he had to do it himself. All right. In that case, I'll have to trouble everyone to do it together. Yi Wentao raised his hand. A gigantic bronze battle axe appeared in his hand. Some mysterious runes were engraved on the battle axe. When Yi Wentao mobilized the force in his body, a buzzing sound suddenly came from it. The next moment, he waved his arm and chopped down with the battle axe in his hand. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1954. Great Azure Sun Axe. Following Yi Wentao's shout, the sky quickly darkened. The wind howled. A huge black spatial crack appeared. The ground also began to crack, and a ravine spread. Immediately after, the sharp power of the axe rapidly transformed into a dazzling azure light ball, like the sun. It approached the barrier of Peach Blossom Cove. The transparent barrier that was suffused with a faint dazzling light began to shake violently. Ripples spread out in all directions. Sun Yi quickly looked back and was about to move when he was stopped by Chu Luiyue. Sun Yi, watch Nan Yifan first. He immediately retracted his leg that was about to step out and nodded in response. Yes. Then, he walked in front of Nan Yifan and waved his sleeve. Nan Yifan's body suddenly flew backward. Sun Yi's figure moved and followed after him. Bang! Nan Yifan finally fell in front of Peach Blossom Cove city gate. He was already at the end of his rope. Sun Yi's move caused his body to tremble and he completely fainted. Actually, to be precise, he fell inside the city gate. When the people in charge of guarding the city gate saw this, not only were they not shocked, their faces were filled with admiration and praise. They had clearly seen how strong Nan Yifan was just now. However, in the end, he was still defeated by Sun Yi. From beginning to end, Sun Yi's body was not stained with a single trace of blood. 13 stood at the side, very close to Nan Yifan. He carefully sized up Nan Yifan, mainly looking at his injuries. As he looked, he recalled Sun Yi's moves. Soon, Sun Yi also walked over. Big brother. 13's face was filled with faint excitement. He had not seen his big brother personally fight for a long time. Now that he saw it, he was indeed powerful. The guards at the side also hurriedly bowed. Greetings to Lord Sun Yi. As people who had experienced the chaos of Peach Blossom Cove, they knew that Sun Yi was also very powerful. However, they did not know that he was so powerful. As expected of Lord Yu's man, the world admired the strong. Sun Yi's display of such powerful strength naturally made them even more convinced. Sun Yi nodded slightly and walked over, throwing a jade bottle to 13. Feed the pill inside to him. Master said to keep him alive. 13 hurriedly took the item. Yes. Although he didn't know why Master wanted to spare Nan Yifan's life, he had to follow Master's orders. 13 walked over and forcefully pried open Nan Yifan's mouth, feeding him the pill. His youthful face was calm and composed, and his movements were clean and swift. The surrounding people watched with trepidation. Isn't 13 only in his teens? Why did he seem so familiar with this kind of thing? Moreover, although Nan Yifan had fainted, he was still a venerable god powerhouse who had terrorized a region. Most people would still be somewhat afraid. However, there was not the slightest bit of fear on 13's face. Such courage was hard to come by. To be able to follow Master Yu, I reckon, they are not ordinary people. Sun Yi quickly retracted his gaze as a ripple flashed across his eyes. Master seems to. Are you finally going to make a move? The forces of both sides were fighting fiercely. At a certain moment, a crack finally appeared on the barrier. Chu Luiyue muttered. The Great Azure Sun Axe is one of the 10 great sacred artifacts. It is indeed extraordinary. Rong Xiu's heart stirred as he glanced at her. As expected, he saw a familiar expression in her eyes. He could not help but curl his lips and ask in a low voice. Do you want it? Digression, I'm crippled. My hands are completely frozen. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1955. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Of course, she wanted such a precious treasure. They had openly come to snatch her peach blossom dock. Why couldn't she think about their divine weapon? However, no one knew who would win in the end. Just let me know if you need my help. Rong Xiao was not interested in these things. However, since she liked it, he would snatch it from her. Chu Luiyue smiled and shook her head. No need. If she wanted it, she could get it herself. This was a dangerous situation, but it was also a rare opportunity. As long as she could solve today's problem, she would be able to enjoy some peace and quiet for a long time. After she finished speaking, she quickly circulated the force in her body. A turbulent and vast force gushed out from the gorgeous water droplet in her dantian. Almost at the same time, the force of the peach blossom dock's barrier increased again. In the blink of an eye, the crack that had just been split open was restored to its original state. The dazzling green sun was once again blocked outside. The forces of both sides clashed fiercely with each other. The surrounding void was constantly collapsing. However, the barrier was still very stable under the intense impact of the energy. The Yi family watched from the back with a complicated expression. It seems that the peach blossom dock has undergone a great change. I remember that when I came here in the past, the barrier was not stable and we could enter and exit at will. Moreover, the slightest movement could cause the void to collapse. Who would have thought that it would turn out like this? I didn't expect that even the family head could not break the barrier. How did Shengwanyu do it? This is really strange. Are we going to be trapped outside like this for the rest of our lives? Then. That would be too shameful. When the Nan family had tried to break the barrier several times and failed, most of the family Yi members did not think much of it. It wasn't until now that Yi Wentao's attack was met with an extremely strong obstruction that they completely understood. This barrier was much stronger than they had expected. Yi Wentao was able to hold such a high position in the family Yi because he was strong enough. If even he could not break the barrier, if that was the case, they would probably be in trouble as well. Moreover, from now on, the entire family Yi would be utterly humiliated. He no longer had the face to stand in the divine ruins world. Yi Wenzhua scolded coldly. What are you talking about? No matter how powerful that Shengwanyu is, it can't fly. She might be able to hold on for a while, but that didn't mean that she could protect Peach Blossom Dock. I want to see how long she can be arrogant for. As soon as he finished speaking, a deep and powerful voice came from the distant horizon. You're my disciple. Of course, you can be arrogant as long as you want. His voice was like a sudden clap of thunder, crushing through the thick layers of clouds and rolling over. Yi Wenzhua's heart sank, and he immediately turned back to look. At the same time, many people were alarmed by the commotion, and they raised their heads to look over. An old man dressed in a long gray robe was coming from the place where heaven and earth met. His speed was extremely fast. In just a few flashes, he appeared in front of everyone. It was none other than the dean of Lingxiao College, Nan Suhuai. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. He came as expected. Nan Suhuai was Chu Liuyue's master, and he had always doted on her. As long as he knew about the situation here, he would definitely rush over. But, how did he get here so quickly? One had to know that the Nan family and family Yi had come quietly this time, and they only showed up when they arrived at Peach Blossom Dock. Their whereabouts were concealed along the way, and it was reasonable to say that there was no way for them to be exposed. Even if Chu Luiyue had sent out a distress signal after knowing that they were here, this place was thousands of miles away from Lingxiao College. Nan Suhuai shouldn't have arrived at this time, right? Nan Suhuai hovered in the air and quickly scanned the surroundings. His gaze lingered on Yi Wenzhua and Jun Zhuqing for a moment, and he snorted. I was wondering why I didn't see you all during this period. I thought you all went out to train and cultivate, but who knew? that you would bully the students of your own college. Yi Wenzhua, you're really competent as the vice dean. Yi Wenzhua's heart trembled when he was stared at by Nan Suwai. However, he quickly suppressed these emotions. Nan Suwai was powerful, but now, Family Yi had the advantage in numbers. Was it possible for him to be afraid of him? In the past, due to various considerations, he had been tolerating it. But now that they had fallen out, there was no need for him to pretend anymore. Yi Wenzhua sneered. Nan Suwai, do you really think I care about being the vice dean? Your position as dean should have been mine all those years ago. You've occupied it for so many years, and now you want to lecture me from above. Are you worthy? Nan Suwai's face turned cold. I know you're still holding a grudge over what happened back then, but this is Master's decision. Besides, every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. If you're dissatisfied with me, just say it. Why do you have to shift all this onto you, Have you thought about the consequences of attacking the students of your own college? Consequences? Yi Wenzhua seemed to have heard a joke. Isn't it just the vice dean of Lingxiao College? Today, I'm telling you that I'm not going to be the vice dean anymore. From now on, Yi Wenzhua, have nothing to do with Lingxiao College anymore. He had Family Yi behind him. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to prove that he wasn't worse than his elder brother, he wouldn't have gone to Lingxiao College. But now, it was meaningless to care about that. Nan Suwai looked down at him and said word by word. Yi Wenzhua, this time, you're not resigning from your position as the vice dean. Instead, you're expelled from Lingxiao College. Yi Wenzhua's face turned pale. At this moment, several figures rushed over from behind. Haha. It's so lively here. Are we late? Everyone looked over. It was Shangguan Jing. There were actually several venerable god powerhouses following behind him. Everyone was stunned. There were at least 20 supreme gods. Where did Shangguan Jing find so many helpers? Under everyone's shocked gaze, Shangguan Jing stroked his beard and said with a smile, I've brought some guests with me. I brought some friends over as guests. Do you not welcome them? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1956. Everyone fell into a strange silence. He brought some guests over as guests, easy for him to say. How could he bring so many supreme gods with him? How could they be guests? They were obviously here for a fight. Chu Luiyue was also stunned for a moment. Then, the corners of her lips curled up as she smiled. How could it be? You came at the right time. As she spoke, her gaze quickly swept past the people behind Shangguan Jing. She realized that most of them were unfamiliar faces. Judging from their auras, they should not be weak. However, at this moment, they were all standing behind Shangguan Jing and looked amiable. Moreover, Chu Luiyue acutely sensed that they seemed to be rather respectful to Shangguan Jing. Chu Luiyue's mind raced. She had roughly guessed the identity of these people. She immediately smiled and bowed politely. Junior Shangguan Yu greets all the seniors. Haha. Brother Shangguan, I heard that this junior of yours is very powerful. I didn't believe it. Now that I've seen it, it's really not ordinary. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s chuckled and said. For thousands of years, countless aristocratic families have tried to seize the Peach Blossom Dock. Without exception, all of them returned in defeat. Today, it was easily taken down by a junior like you. TSK, the young people nowadays really can't be underestimated. As soon as he spoke, he immediately received the agreement of many people beside him. That's right. The things that happened before were spread like wildfire in the world of divine ruins. I thought that it was you who secretly helped and wanted to create momentum for it. Who knew? It turns out that we underestimated you. Sigh, it's a pity that our group of disappointing people can't even compare to half of him. I'm so angry. I really can't be envious. Brother Shangguan, what kind of luck do you have? The middle-aged man who spoke at the beginning chuckled. Look at what you're saying. Brother Shangguan is a hero. Naturally, his juniors are also extraordinary. Otherwise, how could the holy son of the Yuntian Tower fall in love with him so much? Shangguan Jing raised his eyebrows with a proud expression. Of course. The sons and daughters of the Shangguan family are the best. Hearing these words, Chu Liuyue's ears slightly heated up. Everyone liked to hear nice words. However, with so many elders gathered together and teased her in front of so many people, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke with a smile. Senior Zhao Song is right. Being able to marry you, is indeed Rong Xiu's good fortune. Many people were shocked when they heard this name. Zhao Song? This name could be said to be famous in the Divine Ruins world. It was rumored that this person came from a humble background and had no relatives since he was young. He had wandered the world alone. It wasn't until the age of 12 that he was inadvertently discovered to have an outstanding talent for cultivation, and thus began to cultivate. It had to be known that many children in the Divine Ruins world started cultivating at the age of 3 or 4. He had only started at the age of 12, so he was truly late by quite a bit. However, he had the Tianjing Yuan meridian. Furthermore, his comprehension was extremely high. In just 8 short years, he had successfully become a high deity. At that time, he was only 20 years old. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world, such a genius was in existence that was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. From then on, Zhao Song's reputation soared. However, from then on, it was as if he had disappeared and never appeared in front of everyone again. In the beginning, many people guessed that he might have been in seclusion to cultivate, or that he might have been delayed by other matters. However, after a long time, he still did not appear. Gradually, there were rumors that he had met with an accident and had died. Later on, everyone gradually forgot this name and did not mention it anymore. And these things had happened 1,000 years ago. Today, 1,000 years later, who would have thought that Zhao Song would suddenly appear here? Moreover, it seemed that his relationship with Shangguan Jing was extremely good. Generally speaking, people and things that happened 1,000 years ago would not have a deep impression of people and things that happened 1,000 years ago. The reason why the Nan family and Family E reacted so quickly was, on one hand, because they had always thought highly of themselves and were very concerned about such outstanding geniuses. On the other hand, many of them were actually quite old, so they had a clear impression of these matters. When Rong Xiu mentioned it, they quickly recalled. It seemed that Zhao Song had long been familiar with Shangguan Jing. Otherwise, he would not have come to support him. Yi Wenzhua frowned and asked in a low voice, Zhao Song, do you really want to go against Family E for the Shangguan family? Zhao Song laughed heartily and heroically. I'm already here. Why do you still ask such an obvious question? Yi Wenzhua's face darkened when he was ridiculed. However, at this time, he could not go against the other party directly, so he could only endure for the time being. The other party had brought a lot of gods with them. In addition to Nan Suhuai and Shangguan Jing, the number of gods they had was almost more than the two families combined. Moreover, there might be other experts hiding in Peach Blossom Dock City. Because of the arrival of this group of people, the situation on the scene had changed greatly. If they faced the other party directly, they might be the ones at a disadvantage. At this time, Yi Wentao also turned around. Compared to the other people present, his expression and reaction were much calmer. Zhao Song, I don't know how Shangguan Jing persuaded you to come. However, if you are willing to leave now, Family E can give you a higher price. In fact, Yi Wentao knew many of these people. Most of them were rogue cultivators. Not many of them were backed by top aristocratic families and clans, and most of them had not come out in recent years. It was difficult for Shangguan Jing to invite them one by one. The reason why Shangguan Jing could invite so many people was because of his identity as a venerable craftsman. However, Family E did not lack such experts. As for all kinds of treasures and magic weapons, Family Yi had a rich foundation, which was not something that Sheng Guanjing could compare with. Therefore, Yi Wentao was so rich and overbearing. At this point, he would not let anyone or anything be an obstacle to him. After hearing Yi Wentao's words, Zhao Song showed some interest and seemed to be a little interested. Oh. Really? I, Yi Wentao, always keep my words. Yi Wentao said calmly. Zhao Song looked back at the crowd and then at Sheng Guanjing, seeming to be a little hesitant. Then, he nodded. Okay, if you can meet my conditions, I'll agree to leave. I'll also take the people behind me with me. Yi Wentao smiled. Sheng Guanjing was powerful, but after all, he was fighting alone. How could he compete with the entire family Yi? These people had come for nothing. As long as family Yi agrees to give each of us 5 venerable magic weapons, we will leave immediately. As Zhao Song spoke, he stretched out his hand and made a 5 sign. The smile on Yi Wentao's face froze. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1957. Zhao Song. Don't go too far. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but curse. Zhao Song looked innocent. Hey. Didn't your family head ask me to raise the conditions? If I did, why are you still scolding me? Yi Wenzhua gritted his teeth. Big brother said that he could raise the conditions, but he didn't ask you to ask for too much. They were simply taking advantage of the situation. Or Zhao Song and the others didn't plan to negotiate with them at all. They were deliberately humiliating them. Zhao Song spread his hands. So it's because you think that my price is too high. If you don't have the money, don't take on the porcelain job. I thought the Yi family was wealthy and generous, that's why I said it. Who knew that you weren't sincere at all? His words were filled with disappointment. Family Yi was furious. It was clearly Zhao Song who was too much, but in the end, he said that family Yi was stingy. What a bogus accusation. No matter how powerful Sheng Guanjing was, it was impossible for him to have dozens of venerable artifacts, right? He might not even be able to get one for each of them. However, Zhao Song asked for 5 for each of them. Not to mention that family Yi might not have them, even if they did, they would go bankrupt if they took out so many. Nan Su Hui stroked his beard and didn't mind watching the fun. He laughed and said, Senior Zhao Song, if you add in the Nan family, maybe they can take it out too. The faces of the Nan family members instantly darkened. What did it have to do with them? Those words were said by Yi Wentao himself. They had already suffered heavy losses. What else did he want them to do? Zhao Song hissed and shook his head regretfully. The Nan family? They can't even protect their own family head. What can they do? You! Nan Hetian was furious and wanted to rush forward. Zhao Song glanced at him. Oh. What do you mean? Do you want to fight? As soon as he finished speaking, the auras of the gods beside him soared at the same time. It seemed that they really wanted to fight at any time. Sheng Guanjing pressed his hand and chuckled. Hey, don't be so angry. Today, I invited everyone here as guests, so let's get along well. Yu has just taken down the Peach Blossom Cove, and I reckon that she has just tidied it up recently. If there's another battle, how can it be good if our Yu's territory is dirted? Yi Wentao's face finally turned ashen. It was Sheng Guanjing who brought him here. It was obvious that he wanted to fight them to the end. Now, he actually had the nerve to say such words. Dirtying Chu Liuyue's territory. Who was she scolding? Yi Wentao's self-control was excellent. No matter what happened, no matter what his mood was, he could basically maintain a calm appearance and not let anyone see any clues. However, at this moment, because of Sheng Guanjing's words, the plan was broken. In fact, it wasn't because of how sarcastic Sheng Guanjing's words were, but because Yi Wentao knew that the current situation was indeed very unfavorable to them. He was able to maintain his composure earlier because he was very confident that he could win today's battle. But now, it was obvious that the family E was on the losing end of the fight. As for the Nan family, in fact, he didn't take them seriously from the beginning to the end. Those people looked friendly on the surface, but in fact, they were all in their own camps. If it wasn't for the fact that Nan Yifan was still alive and being threatened by Chu Luiyue and the others as a hostage, many of the Nan family members would have completely fallen out with them. If they really fought, those people from the Nan family probably wouldn't be of much use. Therefore, Yi Wentao became anxious in his heart. Bang! At this moment, a loud sound was heard. Everyone looked over, only to see that the cyan sun-like ball of light that Yi Wentao had just unleashed had exploded with a loud bang. The peach blossom dock's boundary began to shake violently. But it still didn't break. Chu Luiyue still managed to block Yi Wentao's move. Everyone's feelings were very complicated. If even Yi Wentao couldn't do it, then who else had the ability to do it? The Nan family members came to take revenge, but now they could only watch as their family head was trapped and tortured inside, and they couldn't do anything to help. Family E came to snatch Peach Blossom Dock, but they couldn't even break the boundary at the outermost boundary. How could they take revenge? How could they fight for it? What a joke. In addition, Shang Guanjing and the others had rushed over and were eyeing them covetously. Yi Wentao and the others were now in a dilemma. Chu Liuyue's mind moved, and the boundary flashed with light and began to devour the residual energy that was violently overflowing. After the Peach Blossom Dock's boundary was strengthened by the power of the God Annihilation Tribulation, it became extremely tough. Under Chu Liuyue's control, it could convert most of the energy into its own, and use it to repair and improve. Unknowingly, it saved Chu Luiyue a lot of trouble. In a short while, most of the surrounding energy had been devoured. The surroundings gradually calmed down. However, the people present couldn't calm down at this moment. This sister was simply an iron bastion. Even without the help of outsiders, Chu Luiyue could rely on this boundary to block most of the attacks. Yi Wentao looked at the sparkling boundary and gradually tightened his grip on the great green sun axe in his hand. It seemed that the previous plan wouldn't work. Right now, he could only think of another way. After pausing for a moment, he suddenly said, Shang Guanjing is right. If so many people attack at the same time, it will indeed cause a great impact on Peach Blossom Dock. Why don't we each pick one person to fight? The winner will become the owner of Peach Blossom Dock. The loser will leave and won't be entangled with us anymore. Digression, 6 p.m. While mobile phone users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1958. Pfft, an undisguised sneer was suddenly heard. Nan Suhui looked at Yi Wentao with a half-smile. Master Family E, you've got a good plan. Just now, when this old man came, you ignored me and said that you would break this barrier no matter what. Why did you suddenly change your mind when Senior Shangguan and the others arrived? Everyone could see that the situation had changed. Even if Yi Wentao joined forces with the Nan family, it would be difficult for them to gain an advantage. The gods that Shang Guanjing had invited were not just for show. If a fight really broke out, it would be obvious who would win and who would lose. After this battle, the Nan family and Family E would suffer heavy losses. Yi Wentao did not want to take such a risk, so he changed his mind and suggested something else. Yi Wentao was infuriated by Nan Suhuai's public mockery and disdain, but he quickly suppressed his anger. That was not the most important thing right now. Only by breaking the stalemate could they turn the situation around. This was the only way he could take down Peach Blossom Dock. He took a deep breath and looked straight at Chu Luiyue. Shang Guanyu, do you agree? He did not care what others thought because it did not matter. Since everyone believed that Chu Luiyue was the master of Peach Blossom Dock, she was the only one who needed to be questioned. It was up to her whether she agreed or not. Countless pairs of eyes fell on Chu Luiyue. Then, they saw Chu Liuyue's red lips curl slightly. Her eyes glimmered as she nodded gently. All right. All right? Did she agree? Almost everyone was stunned. Even the people from the Peach Blossom Dock were shocked. She should have rejected this suggestion. Why did she agree? They clearly had the upper hand in the current situation. There was no need for them to compromise with Yi Wentao. Why would Master agree? 13 muttered in a daze. As he asked, he could not help but look at Sun Yi. He saw that Sun Yi looked calm, as if he was not surprised. Big brother? 13 could not help but ask. What do you think Master is thinking? Sun Yi's expression was indifferent. He paused for a moment before explaining. It's nothing. Master really doesn't want to dirty the new territory that has just been cleaned up. 13 was speechless. If you can solve the problem in the most convenient way, why waste your energy? Sun Yi continued. 13 nodded thoughtfully. He roughly understood what his elder brother meant. Although they had more paragons on their side, they had a higher chance of winning. But if so many people were to really fight, it would be earth-shattering. Even if they won in the end, they would have to pay a heavy price. If he could defeat Yi Wentao in a one-on-one duel, it would save him a lot of time and effort. But the key point was that Yi Wentao's strength is tyrannical, and it is very likely that he will personally fight. Who will Master choose to have the certainty of victory? Yi Wentao took a step forward and looked at Chu Luiyue with a smile, but the corners of his eyes were still cold. How brave! Originally, he was still a little hesitant, thinking that Chu Luiyue would very likely not agree. After all, this was too risky. But fortunately, she made this choice in the end. Since I am the one who initiated this, the person who will fight should naturally be me. Yi Wentao's words were followed by silence. They had already expected this. Then, they heard Yi Wentao continue. Similarly, Shang Guanyu, everyone is fighting over Peach Blossom Dock, so the person you choose should be your own person, and no outsiders should interfere. You don't have any objections to this, right? Everyone was stunned. Yi Wentao's subtext was that Chu Luiyue could not ask Zhao Song and the others for help, and could only choose one of her closest and most trusted people to fight. That narrowed her options by a lot. Yi Wentao's words were clearly to further suppress Chu Luiyue. This statement wasn't wrong, but it was somewhat opportunistic. Moreover, it was said by someone of Yi Wentao's status and strength, which was even more degrading and despicable. Zhao Song clicked his tongue and could not help but say, Brother Shangguan, we have been away from worldly affairs for a long time, so we don't know that the people out there are so shameless. Shangguan Jing was also suppressing the anger in his heart, and he sneered. You are so righteous when it comes to seizing other people's territory. What else can't you do? Many of the family Yi's people looked terrible, and their faces turned pale. They had always been high and noble, and even the first-class families were very polite and respectful when they saw them. When had they ever been humiliated like this? The point was, they could not refute it. However, compared to these people who were fidgeting, Yi Wentao's face was calm, and there was not the slightest ripple. It was as if he could not hear these words at all. He just stared at Chu Luiyue, waiting for her answer. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. He was indeed worthy of being the head of the family Yi for so many years. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary person could have. She nodded. What the head of the family Yi said is not without reason. Everyone was even quieter. Some of the family Yi and the Nan family were secretly relieved. On the other hand, many of the people in Peach Blossom Dock were worried. This was a bad choice. Even if Chu Luiyue did not agree, Yi Wentao could not say anything. But why did she agree? Yi Wentao narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, have you chosen the person? Chu Luiyue raised the corner of her mouth and took a step forward. I've chosen. Peach Blossom Dock Shangguanyu, fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1959. Shangguanyu of Peach Blossom Dock, fight. Her clear voice spread far and wide, landing clearly in everyone's ears. After a brief moment of silence, the sound of people sucking in cold breaths could be heard incessantly. Is Chu Luiyue out of her mind? She's going to fight Yi Wentao in person? Isn't she courting death? Even though she was indeed more powerful than many exalted gods of the same level, she was still an exalted god. Yi Wentao was one of the best among the exalted gods. She had almost no chance of winning in a fight between the two of them. Yi Wentao was also stunned. For once, he was slow to react. Are you sure? He scanned Chu Luiyue's body suspiciously. With her? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and chuckled. I don't regret my words. Why, Family Yi, don't you think it's a good idea? Why would it be a bad idea? This is great. Yi Wentao had thought of this possibility, but he did not have much hope. He could tell that Chu Luiyue valued Peach Blossom Dock very much. If she had any sense left, she would not have chosen to fight in person. Besides Zhao Song and the others, she had other choices. Isn't Sun Yi an excellent choice? But in the end, she chose to fight in person. Yi Wentao was shocked, but he could not help but have some doubts. Chu Luiyue is so bold. Does she have some other trump card? At that thought, he could not help but look at Rongxiu. Rongxiu's expression was calm, and nothing could be seen on his face. There seemed to be a faint smile on his lips. It seemed like he approved of Chu Luiyue's choice. However, there was more to it than that. Yi Wentao's mind raced. In the end, he suppressed this thought. Even if Chu Luiyue had some tricks up her sleeve, they would be useless in the face of absolute power. As long as he defeated her quickly, this matter would be settled. There was no time to lose. Yi Wentao laughed. You have guts. I admire you. Next, please enlighten me, Your Highness. As he spoke, he paused for a moment and looked around him. Where would you like to start, Your Highness? He was asking about the area outside the barrier. Chu Luiyue laughed. My Peach Blossom Cove has just been tidied up with much difficulty, but it can't withstand any more torment. It's still outside. After saying that, her figure moved, and she actually flashed out of the enchantment. Everyone's eyes on her. Shock, curiosity, worry, confusion, Chu Luiyue's eyes. In the blink of an eye, she was thought. She's and you uses this garden. Chu Luiyue smiled and didn't mind as she said loudly, There seemed to be a hint of a smile in her voice. Apart from Yi Wentao, the Nan family and family Yis were the people closest to her. Hearing Chu Luiyue's s, they almost subconsciously stepped back. But when they started to move, they suddenly realized that they had unconsciously followed Chu Luiyue's instructions. She wasn't anyone to them. Why should they listen to her? For a moment, many people were embarrassed. But they've already retreated halfway, a little further. Chu Luiyue said. This is. I'm fighting with family Yis. Swords have no eyes. It won't be good if I hurt you. Hers made everyone speechless. They had no choice but to step back again. In the end, with Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao as the center, there was a large empty space in the middle. Behind Chu Luiyue stood Sheng Guanjing, Zhao Song, and the others. Behind Yi Wentao, family Yi and the Nan family stood together, but there was still a distance between them. Is it okay now? Yi Wentao asked faintly. Chu Luiyue nodded. At this moment, she was holding a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. She already looked quite imposing. Yi Wentao's gaze swept across the armillary shield without batting an eyelid. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Previously, she had felt that something was wrong with Yi Wentao, as if he was trying his best to force her to make a move. Now, it seemed that he was here for the armillary shield, please. Yi Wentao replied. After saying that, he slightly staggered his feet, and the aura on his body suddenly soared. At this point, Rongxiu's figure moved, and he flew out of the barrier. However, he didn't go forward. Instead, he went to stand beside Sheng Guanjing and the others. He greeted Sheng Guanjing, Nan Su Huai, and the others in turn. Zhao Song couldn't help but say, "It's been a long time since we last met. You're even more brilliant than before. The princess consort is indeed extraordinary. It's just that, are you really not worried?" Rong Xiu chuckled and said calmly, "Peach Blossom Cove is Yu's territory. Naturally, she can do whatever she wants. Since she made this choice, she must have her reasons. All he needed to do was to respect and support her decision." Zhao Song and the others looked at each other in surprise. They had long heard that Rong Xiu doted on this princess consort, but they didn't expect it to be to this extent. On one hand, he said that out of love and respect for Chu Luyue. On the other hand, he probably had enough confidence in her. However, a high god against a high god, no matter how they thought about it, they wouldn't win. At first, they thought that Chu Luyue would talk about some conditions, but she didn't. She just started like that. If she loses, with Rong Xiu, Sheng Guanjing, and the others around, Yi Wentao definitely can't take her life. However, they definitely can't take action unless it's a crucial moment. Then, won't Chu Luyue still lose the entire Peach Blossom Cove? Rong Xiu knew what they were thinking, but he didn't explain. He placed his hands behind his back and looked forward. After all, Yi Wentao was a high god. At this moment, he was prepared to go all out, and his aura became even stronger. Behind him, quite a few people whispered softly. "I really don't know why Sheng Guanyu is so stubborn. She actually agreed to this and even accepted the challenge herself. Isn't it obvious who will win or lose? Humph. She's young, and it's inevitable that she's young and hot-blooded. She doesn't know who she is once she has some ability and fame. She'll cry in due time. How long do you think Master will take her down? 3 moves. It can't be that she won't admit defeat when she loses, right? How can that be? She's in front of so many people. Even if she can't bear to, she has to accept her loss. I think she'll regret it soon. It's a pity that there's no medicine for regret in this world." The group of people laughed softly. It was obvious that to them, Wentao would win for sure. The only problem was how long he would take to end this battle. Chu Luyue looked calm as if she didn't care. Bang! A reddish-gold fire suddenly surged out of Chu Luyue's body. Digression, 6:30 p.m. WoW mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. Chapter 1960. The loud and clear cry of a phoenix spread far and wide between heaven and earth. Immediately after, a small figure walked out of the flames. It was a little girl who looked no more than 3 or 4 years old. She was wearing a reddish-gold lotus leaf dress and had 2 round buns on her head. She was barefooted and looked very cute. Especially that pair of big black grape-like eyes, which were blinking and looked very lively and cute. When she walked, the golden bell on her head would let out a crisp sound. Many people looked over. When they saw the little girl's appearance, they were first stunned and then suddenly came back to their senses. Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. This is her contracted divine beast? No. This Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is so young. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be able to transform into a human form. Didn't they say that this is the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? There should be something different, right? Although the news of Chu Luyue contracting dumpling had already spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world, the number of people who had actually seen dumpling could be counted with one's fingers. Therefore, when dumpling appeared at this time, it immediately caused everyone to be shocked. Dumpling was already used to this kind of situation. She stood in front of Chu Luyue with one hand on her waist and the other pointing at Yi Wentao. She frowned and asked angrily. "You old thing, you want to harm our Ayu?" She was still young, so even if she spoke, there was still a strong childish tone. To the crowd, Not only did it not have any deterrence, but it also sounded a little funny. Some people couldn't help but laugh out loud. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was an ancient divine beast, and the person in front of them was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her status was even more noble. But, she was too young. What kind of combat power could such a small thing have? Against ordinary cultivators, she might be a little deterrent, but against someone of Yi Wentao's level, it was really useless. Yi Wentao stared at Dumpling and his brows moved slightly. She could transform into a human form at such a young age. No wonder she was chosen as the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan before she broke the contract with Chu Luiyue. Her talent bloodline should be extremely strong. Unlike the others, Yi Wentao had always been cautious. Therefore, when he saw Dumpling, he didn't disregard her like the others. We only agreed to fight to decide the ownership of Peach Blossom Dock. Yi Wentao said lightly. Putting everything else aside, the other party's identity was not to be trifled with. He didn't want to summon Yi Zhao's group over. How long has it been? Someone actually came over to snatch it openly? You still have the nerve to say it? You're already so old, how shameless. Tui. Yi Wentao frowned. Even if he didn't care about these things, it was really embarrassing to be insulted by a little girl in front of so many people. It would be strange if he didn't get angry. Cut the crap, let's see who's the real deal. He looked at Chu Luiyue and his voice turned cold. There was no point in pestering endlessly like this. End the battle quickly and take down Peach Blossom Dock. All the problems would be solved easily. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Family Yi, why are you in such a hurry? I'm not ready yet. Yi Wentao frowned. Ready? Wasn't it just a fight? What else was there to prepare? She already had the weapon in her hand and summoned the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix. What else did she want to do? Just as Yi Wentao was getting impatient, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Zichen, I'll have to trouble you this time. There's more? Yi Wentao couldn't help but say. Shangguanyu, this is a one-on-one fight. You can't ask for outside help. Suddenly, his voice stopped abruptly. The scene before him caused his eyes to be filled with astonishment. A tall and straight figure silently appeared beside Chu Luiyue. It was a young man in his 20s. He was very tall and wore a long black robe. His facial features were handsome and his expression was cold. He just stood there quietly, and cold air continued to spread out from his body to the surroundings. His aura was very strong and oppressive. It was obvious that he was not weak. However, the most important thing was that there was a purple gold mark between his eyebrows. At first glance, it looked like an eye. Yi Wentao's breathing suddenly stopped. That was an eye. Yi Wentao had dealt with the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle clan before. Therefore, when he first saw Zichen, he keenly sensed that the aura on his body was very familiar. It was indeed the aura of the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. Could it be, this young man was not a human, but a legendary Three-Eyed Eagle? Yi Wentao rejected the idea as soon as it appeared in his mind. How could it be? Although the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle was a high-level divine beast, only the two primordial divine beast clans could transform into human form. For so many years, there had never been a legendary Three-Eyed Eagle that could transform into human form in the world of divine ruins. For a moment, Yi Wentao almost thought that this was just an illusion that the other party had used some sort of camouflage technique. However, he soon realized that was not the case. This was indeed the physical body of a human. Yi Wentao's heart was filled with shock. How could the others present not be the same? The crowd, which was still a little noisy, fell silent instantly. Chu Luiyue said with a smile, Yi Wentao is right. Patriarch Yi is right. Since the two of us have agreed to a one-on-one duel, of course we can't ask for outside help. However, Zichen is not included in this list. Because, he is also my contracted divine beast. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1961. The fact that Chu Luiyue had two contracted divine beasts was not a secret in the Yintian Tower. Many people had witnessed Rongxiu summoning two divine beasts at the same time when he was choosing his concubine. One of them was the red-tailed phoenix, and the other was the legendary three-eyed eagle. Those who were observant would know if they asked around. Before Yi Wentao came, he had specially investigated Chu Luiyue. When he saw Zichen, he was stunned for a moment before he immediately understood. There was no need to ask. This little girl had broken through from that red-tailed phoenix. And the black-clothed young man next to her was definitely the legendary three-eyed eagle. He had actually transformed into a human form. This kind of thing was simply unheard of. It was not that Yi Wentao did not consider the fact that Chu Luiyue had contracted divine beasts to help her. However, even with the help of divine beasts, Chu Luiyue's strength would not be too strong due to the limitations of her own realm. At the very least, she could not be compared to him. The moment Chu Luiyue agreed to fight alone, Wentao had already thought that he would win. Who knew that Chu Luiyue's two contracted divine beasts had actually transformed into human forms? The amount of information contained in this was too much. To be able to do this, on one hand, it proved that these two divine beasts were extremely talented and powerful. On the other hand, Yi Wentao was almost certain that they had definitely encountered some amazing opportunity. Perhaps Chu Luiyue still has some shocking trump card in her hands. Who knows? Zichen's appearance also caused the expressions of the surrounding people to change a few times. Everyone present had tyrannical strength. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world, they were absolutely famous. However, even though they had seen countless things in the world, they were still stunned at this moment. It can't be, right? This is the legendary three-eyed eagle that Shengguan Yu contracted? It transformed into a human form? Didn't they say that only the two ancient divine beasts could do this? What's going on now? I've read many ancient books, but I don't think there's anything like this. Wait. Don't you think that Zichen's aura is a little strange? Other than the aura of the legendary three-eyed eagle, it seems, there's also a faint pressure. I feel it too, but I just can't remember. Just as everyone was discussing, Jun Zhuqing suddenly thought of something. He tilted his head slightly and looked at Miao Fushan. In an instant, something seemed to flash in his mind. It's the great phoenix dragon. He blurted out. As soon as these words were spoken, the group of people around them heard them clearly. The expressions of Yi Wenzhua and the others changed. The great phoenix dragon? How could? Someone subconsciously wanted to refute, but before he could finish his sentence, he stopped abruptly. This was because Zichen's aura was very similar to Miao Fushan's. It was as if there was a string strung those pieces together. A hint of understanding flashed in Jun Zhuqing's eyes. Could this be the reason why Mao Zhen went to the Yintian Tower? When Rongxiu and Chu Luiyue got married, Mao Zhen, as the clan leader, personally went to congratulate them. Everyone was shocked and confused. They didn't know when the two of them had become friends with the great phoenix dragon. Jun Zhuqing had always been puzzled by this. Now that he saw Zichen, he finally understood. Zichen definitely had the bloodline power of the great phoenix dragon in his body. Sure enough, as soon as this thought flashed in his mind, Miao Fushan flew out of the barrier and came to Rongxiu's side. He looked at Zichen, stroked his beard, and said with a smile. Zichen, I haven't seen you for a while. Your strength has increased again. Zichen bowed respectfully. It's all thanks to Senior Mao Zhen. These two simple sentences caused the surrounding atmosphere to freeze for a moment. What did he mean? Not only was Zichen related to the great phoenix dragon, but he was also related to Mao Zhen. Then, Mao Zhen was the clan leader of the great phoenix dragon. If that was the case, didn't that mean they couldn't afford to offend Zichen? Family E is a god, while I'm just a high god. There's a huge difference in our strength. If I don't make more preparations and go all out, I don't think I have a chance of winning. Chu Luiyue raised an eyebrow and said. Yi Wentao's face turned pale. Miao Fushan's words just now were clearly expressing his attitude. He wanted to support Zichen. It's no wonder Chu Luiyue and the rest somehow got involved with the great Phoenix Dragon clan. No wonder Miao Fushan would rather break the contract and stand on Chu Luiyue's side. Now, Miao Fushan's attitude represented Mao Zhen's and the entire great Phoenix Dragon's attitude. He suppressed the anger in his heart and stared at the three figures in front of him. Chu Luiyue stood in the middle, while Dumpling and Zichen stood on either side. On the surface, the aura and pressure of these three people were much inferior to the others. However, in reality, the forces behind them caused Yi Wentao to have no choice but to be extremely cautious. On one side was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and on the other side was the great phoenix dragon. Yi Wentao had never thought that he would be besieged by two primordial divine beasts at the same time one day. "Princess, you're really something." Yi Wentao sneered, his eyes cold. Ordinary people could only form a contract with one fiend beast, but Chu Luiyue had formed a contract with two fiend beasts at the same time. More importantly, one was a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was a godly three-eyed eagle that was inextricably linked to the great Phoenix Dragon clan. Who didn't know that the relationship between these two primordial divine beasts was very subtle? Now, they were serving the same master. Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen didn't seem to care about this matter. What ability did Chu Luiyue rely on to do this? And the armillary sky shield in her hand, looking at the pair of dark and bright eyes that seemed to be smiling, Yi Wentao felt inexplicably uneasy. He faintly felt that he had underestimated Chu Luiyue. Swoosh! Chu Luiyue suddenly raised the crimson heaven sword in her hand. A short and sharp sound of something breaking through the air was heard. "Master Family Yi, please." As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Luiyue jumped up with the tip of her foot. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to rapidly gather toward the crimson heaven sword. Yi Wentao's face darkened. This Chu Luiyue is really gutsy. At this moment, not only was she not afraid, she even chose to take the initiative to attack. It seemed that she had a lot of confidence in herself. Relying on those two fiend beasts? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. The appearance of Dumpling and Zichen had indeed made him a little more apprehensive. But that was all. One had to know that the strength of a contracted mythological beast was largely determined by the master of the contract. Chu Luiyue was just a high deity now. Even if she tried her best, what could she do? Yi Wentao's chi sank into his dantian. Great Azure Sun Axe. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1962. Yi Wentao was a god after all. The moment he raised his hand, the aura on his body began to surge crazily. Soon, the aura around him greatly suppressed Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's speed began to decrease at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Dumpling's bloodline was noble and was not affected by the aura at all. She turned her head to look at Zichen, rubbed her nose, and looked up at him. "Let's compete today and see who can take care of him first." Zichen narrowed his eyes slightly. He was not interested in this kind of competition. However, when he saw Dumpling's enthusiasm, his lips moved slightly, and the words of rejection that were about to come out of his mouth suddenly stopped. Dumpling did not notice this and only took it as Zichen's agreement. Her body moved, and she transformed into a reddish-gold stream of light that went straight for Yi Wentao. "See if I don't beat you to death today." Dumpling shouted loudly and arrived in front of Yi Wentao in the blink of an eye. She punched out. Her palms were white and chubby, and she clenched them into small fists like a ball of soft white cotton. From afar, she did not seem to be a threat at all. Yi Wentao did not take Dumpling's attack seriously at first. However, the closer he got, the more he was surprised to find that the power contained in Dumpling's fist was far beyond his imagination. He frowned, and then directly swung the sun great axe. The green light quickly gathered. The sharp and scorching aura immediately caused the surrounding air to become boiling hot. The energy surged, and it kept closing in on Dumpling. A totem flashed between Dumpling's eyebrows. A dazzling purplish gold glow instantly erupted from her body. Boom! The power of both sides collided fiercely just like that. The violent energy vibrations instantly left a huge crater in the ground. Immediately after, Dumpling's figure flew backward. The terrifying impact swept over, and her body fell uncontrollably toward the ground. Dumpling's chest felt stuffy. She glanced around and found that she was about to fall to the ground. She immediately widened her eyes. This won't do. If she were to fall in front of so many people, it would be too embarrassing. She gritted her teeth and was about to save herself when she suddenly felt a gentle force lift her up. This force slowed down her speed, and after stabilizing her, it quickly retreated. Dumpling turned around in a daze, only to see a black figure flashing past. Just now, was Zichen the one who attacked? Dumpling was stunned for a moment and blinked her eyes. Weren't they competing? Zichen was actually helping her? Looking at the tall figure in front of her, Dumpling bit her finger thoughtfully. He should be doing this for Master's sake. That's right. Relatively speaking, it was more important to deal with that annoying old man first. As for the competition, it was all incidental. Of course, Yu was the main person in charge. Dumpling thought seriously. But, if she accepted his help for no reason, wouldn't she be at a disadvantage? Dumpling clenched her fists, and her eyes burned with excitement and fighting spirit. With a tap of her toes, she quickly rushed forward again. Flanking from the other side. She couldn't lose. Dumpling was sent flying. On the other side, Yi Wentao's situation was not much better. Under the impact of that shocking and violent force, he took half a step back, and the soles of his feet sank deeply into the ground. In this way, he finally managed to stabilize his body. Although he had the upper hand compared to Dumpling, Yi Wentao was not happy at all. He was a god. And Dumpling? She was just a young crimson gold heavenly phoenix. He originally thought that this attack would directly kill Dumpling, or at least make her lose her ability to fight. But the result was the complete opposite. After Zichen caught Dumpling, Yi Wentao hurriedly took a look and was shocked to find that Dumpling did not seem to be injured. Such powerful physical strength had surpassed many adult crimson gold heavenly phoenixes. How could this be? Yi Wentao could not figure it out. He was puzzled and angry. But he did not have much time to think about this, because soon, Zichen caught up. Like Dumpling, he chose to attack head-on. A cold aura spread out from Zichen's body. He suddenly raised his hand, and a cold black mist spread out from his palm. Yi Wentao was about to move, but he was shocked to find that a layer of frost had formed on his sun great axe. And at this time, the cold air was still accumulating, causing the layer of ice to become thicker and thicker. Affected by the cold air, Yi Wentao was shocked to find that his force was gradually unable to infuse into the sun great axe. He waved the sun great axe in disbelief, and wanted to use the force in his body to resist the cold air, but he found that the effect was minimal. Yi Wentao almost sucked in a cold breath. What the hell? It was just a legendary three-eyed eagle, how could it suppress the sun great axe? This was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts. What Yi Wentao did not know was that Zichen's physical body was forged from the bones and blood of a real great phoenix dragon, so it was already extremely strong. In addition, he had the support of Mao Zhen's strength. His strength far exceeded that of an ordinary legendary three-eyed eagle. To a certain extent, he had borrowed Mao Zhen's pressure, so naturally, he could suppress Yi Wentao. What frightened Yi Wentao even more was that the cold air was still spreading toward him. At this moment, a bright silver light flashed over. Chu Luiyue slashed down with his sword. The sharp blade slashed straight at Yi Wentao's face. Digression, I actually strained my right shoulder when I slept yesterday. I woke up at 5 in the morning because of the pain, and I got up to apply plasters. I cried because of my own stupidity. I'll come back at 6 o'clock. Woo. Mobile user, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1963. In a moment of desperation, Yi Wentao made a prompt decision and threw out the Sun Great Azure Axe in his hand. At the same time, he quickly retreated. The sharp edge of the sword brushed past the tip of his nose, narrowly missing him. Even though Yi Wentao's physical strength was extremely strong, Chu Liuyue's sword still caused him to feel a piercing pain. Almost half of his face was shaved off. Bang! The Sun Great Azure Axe went straight for Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue raised her hand and raised her sword. Clang! An extremely crisp sound of collision was heard. Chu Liyue's hand went numb. The Sun Great Azure Axe changed direction and flew out. At this moment, Yi Wentao suddenly stopped. With a thought, the Sun Great Azure Axe returned to his hand. It was ice cold to the touch. Yi Wentao's heart sank. The Sun Great Azure Axe's power had been completely sealed. He wanted to forcefully break it, but the layer of ice that covered it contained an extremely strong pressure. He couldn't completely remove it in a short period of time. In other words, Zichen had just made a move and directly removed one of his divine weapons. Yi Wentao was puzzled. At the same time, he was gnashing his teeth in hatred. He really didn't know how Zichen had frozen the Sun Great Azure Axe when he didn't seem to have done anything. This battle had just begun, but he had already suffered heavy losses. The situation would only get worse later on. Chu Liyue calmly rotated her sore wrist. The Sun Great Azure Axe was one of the 10 great divine weapons after all. It also contained Yi Wentao's power. The collision just now was truly very powerful. Fortunately, her divine body had reached large success. Moreover, Zichen had already helped to freeze most of the power on it. Otherwise, she might not have been able to take this attack head-on. Family head Yi, I see that your Sun Great Azure Axe doesn't seem to be very useful in your hands. Why don't you show it to me? Chu Liyue revealed a smile and said very sincerely. Yi Wentao was so angry that his forehead was throbbing. How could he not tell that Chu Liyue was coveting his Sun Great Azure Axe? She hadn't even won yet, and she was already so arrogant. He snorted coldly. If you want to see, then come over with your own ability. After saying that, he held his breath and waved his hand. Then, a ball of dark green light, like a river, rushed out of his palm. Those rays of light quickly spread out, becoming stars that floated in the air. Space, 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 of course. Family head is actually using God's domain. A cry came from the family's crowd. The E of Chu Yi's families of the world continents of the world of the world of the world of E's SS Chu E Y's. Wentao. Wentao. E. As long as he made a move, it was very likely that he would be able to defeat her in 3 moves. Even when they saw Dumpling and Zichen appear, they still felt that Chu Liyue was no match for Yi Wentao. With the help of Dumpling and Zichen, she could at most hold on for a little longer, but it still wouldn't affect the outcome. If 3 moves weren't enough, then 10? Because they were still some distance away from Chu Liyue and Yi Wentao, they couldn't personally experience the immense pressure that Zichen exerted on Yi Wentao. Therefore, many people were shocked when they saw Yi Wentao summon his God's domain after his first attack failed. Was Chu Liyue really so powerful that she could force Family Head to summon his God's domain? The green light spots drifted and soon completely enveloped the space in all directions. An indescribably heavy pressure suddenly descended upon them. Chu Liyue instantly felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on her body, causing her to expend a lot of effort with every step she took. Even the origin power in her body became sluggish under the influence of this pressure. This God's domain was different from the pressure that Yi Wentao had exerted when he used the Sun Great Axe. In this space, almost everything was under Yi Wentao's control. Big Brother's God's domain is extremely powerful. Not to mention a supreme deity like Shengguanyu, even many supreme deities might not be able to break free from it. This time, she shouldn't be able to do anything. Yi Wenzuo was speaking, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by someone. Look! What's that? Yi Wentao frowned and looked at it impatiently. He was stunned by what he saw. Chu Luiyue stood there with her back straight and her eyes gently closed. Then, a silver-red stream of light surged out of her body. In an instant, it surged like a river. The dazzling light was like a sharp blade, cleanly slicing through the frozen space. That's her god's domain. Someone murmured in shock. Isn't she a supreme deity? How can this god's domain compete with Master's? The silver-red god's domain continued to expand and soon surrounded Chu Luiyue. When the last of the green light around her dissipated, she finally opened her eyes again. At this moment, Yi Wentao also looked up in shock and met Chu Luiyue's eyes. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. There was not the slightest bit of fear or cowardice in that pair of dark, calm, and starry eyes. There was only a crazy desire to fight. Yi Wentao had fought with countless cultivators in his life, and there was no lack of geniuses and powerhouses among them. However, he had never seen such a gaze before. It was like a sudden burst of fire under the cold mountains. It had a powerful aura that could devour everything. It was as if everything in front of her was just a passing cloud or floating in the water. It was not worth mentioning at all. Yi Wentao did not know how to describe this feeling. He was clearly the one with a higher realm and should be the one looking down on everything. However, at this moment, facing Chu Luiyue, who seemed to have an indomitable aura, he inexplicably felt a little. He could not describe his feelings at this moment. It was shock, astonishment, and confusion. There was also a trace of nervousness and worry that even he did not want to admit. This gaze was not something that Chu Luiyue should have. Whoosh! The silver-red god's domain surged. Like waves crashing against the reef, rich energy kept surging and making sounds. Soon, the two gods' domains were in a confrontation. In fact, from the outside, Chu Luiyue's god's domain only occupied a small space that surrounded her, Zi Chen, and Dumpling. Yi Wentao's god's domain still occupied a larger area. It seemed that Yi Wentao had the upper hand. However, in reality, the area around Chu Luiyue was forcefully taken from Yi Wentao by using her own god's domain. Even though Yi Wentao's god's domain was stronger, it was blocked outside and could no longer break through Chu Luiyue's god's domain. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1964. The force in Chu Luiyue's body was being consumed at a crazy rate. Her lips were slightly pale, which showed that it was not easy for her to reach this stage. Yi Wentao was indeed superior to her in terms of strength. This was undeniable. If she wanted to snatch a small piece of land under Yi Wentao's god realm, she would need to expend more energy than Yi Wentao. Fortunately, origin power was something she didn't lack the least. At this moment, Dumpling rushed forward again. This time, her fist was covered with a layer of reddish-gold flames. The scorching heat caused the surrounding air to become scorching hot. Yi Wentao clenched his teeth. Normally, a high god would not be able to withstand the pressure of his god realm. Sometimes, he did not even need to make a move and his opponents would have already fallen under his god realm. However, his opponents this time were really difficult to deal with. Tuanzi and Zi Chen were existences that possessed the bloodlines of two ancient divine beasts. Moreover, their strengths weren't weak at all. The god realm could not suppress them at all. As for Chu Luiyue, it was even more strange. In the entire divine ruins, there were very few people who could defeat him in the god realm. However, Chu Luiyue did it. Yi Wentao was furious and humiliated. Since the beginning of the fight, the strength that Chu Luiyue had displayed was a public slap to his face. Why was a high god so difficult to deal with? Seeing that Dumpling's fist was about to hit him, Yi Wentao felt the scorching heat. He felt the flames in his chest twitching as if they were about to explode. Finally, he bent his knees slightly and made a sudden move. His entire body was like an arrow that had left the bow as he charged toward Dumpling. He finally understood that if he wanted to get rid of Chu Luyue, he had to first cripple her two helpers. Due to his fear of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon, Yi Wentao did not intend to kill them. But, at the very least, they had to lose their ability to fight. Only then would he be free to deal with Chu Luyue. Without any fancy moves, Yi Wentao chose to throw a punch. 8-directional Divine Fist. The power in his body surged towards his fist and collided with Dumpling's fist. Bang! A muffled sound was suddenly heard. One big and one small, one hard and one soft. No matter how he looked at it, the outcome was predestined. However, in the next moment, everyone was shocked to discover that Dumpling wasn't sent flying this time. She was suspended in mid-air, facing Yi Wentao's fist. A trace of blood gushed out from the corner of her mouth, but she didn't retreat even half a step. Immediately after, the crimson gold flame spread towards Yi Wentao at lightning speed. An intense burning pain came from his hand. Yi Wentao's face was distorted for a moment. But at the same time, he was shocked to discover that Dumpling's bloodline power was purer than he had expected. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to withstand his punch. She wasn't even an adult yet, but her physical strength was almost on par with his. If she was given more time, who knew how strong she would be? Thinking of this, Yi Wentao's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold glint. If he let them go today, they would definitely become a huge disaster in the future. Even if he didn't kill them, he had to get rid of them. He suddenly changed his fist into a palm and grabbed Dumpling's wrist without caring about the burning flame. Dumpling was shocked. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly felt a chill on her wrist. She had a bad feeling and immediately flung Yi Wentao's hand away. She felt a stinging pain. Dumpling immediately looked down and discovered that Yi Wentao had used a sharp object to cut open a wound on her wrist. Fortunately, she had dodged in time and the wound was very shallow. Under the burning of the flame, the bloodstain quickly dried up, leaving behind a dark red bloodstain. Dumpling frowned. She felt that something was wrong. Swoosh! Yi Wentao didn't stop. Instead, he rushed forward at an even faster speed. Dumpling immediately raised her hand to counterattack. But at this moment, she was shocked to discover that she was suddenly unable to gather the power in her body. Yi Wentao was almost within reach. Dumpling's heart suddenly felt like it was being clenched by something. Suddenly, a tall black figure flashed and appeared in front of Dumpling. It was Zichen. He waved his sleeve and several sharp icicles shot out. Yi Wentao was forced to stop. Taking advantage of this moment, Zichen turned around and glanced at Dumpling. Sensing his gaze, Dumpling also raised her head. Zichen was stunned. At this moment, Dumpling's face had a rare look of panic. He had almost never seen such an expression on her face. Zichen's heart skipped a beat. He immediately looked at the wound on her wrist. He quickly went forward and picked up Dumpling. What's wrong with Dumpling? Chu Luyue also sensed that something was wrong and immediately went forward with a frown. Zichen's movements were extremely fast. He carried Dumpling over to Chu Luyue's side. Chu Luyue then saw that Dumpling's face was deathly pale. Actually, from the outside, Dumpling didn't seem to have any problems. But her appearance was clearly abnormal. Dumpling? Chu Luyue's heart sank. He immediately reached out and touched her wrist. Immediately, his brows furrowed tightly. The energy in Dumpling's body seemed to have completely gone out of control. It began to wander and attack in all directions, unable to gather. However, the force of the attack wasn't very strong. It was like a fog drifting freely. At first glance, there didn't seem to be any problem. However, Chu Luyue's heart surged with immense anger. This was clearly Yi Wentao deliberately channeling his energy into Dumpling's body and forcefully disrupting the circulation of energy in her body. She suddenly raised her head and glared at Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao. You're despicable. How could you use such a despicable method? Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that Chu Luiyue could see through it. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were extremely cold. I just wanted to let her rest for a while. How is that despicable? Don't forget that we're in a battle. The winner has to be determined. Who can you blame for not protecting your contracted mythological beast well? You, Chu Luiyue was about to step forward when he was suddenly stopped by Dumpling. You, Chu Luiyue turned around. Her brows were full of worry. Dumpling, don't worry. This matter isn't over today. Dumpling shook her head. I'm fine. You, don't worry. I'll be fine soon. Dumpling had always been lively. Chu Luiyue rarely saw her so weak. For a moment, she felt unbearably angry. However, she still gently patted Dumpling's head. Okay. Dumpling, wait for me here. I'll be back soon. After that, she glanced at Zichen. Zichen, you stay here and protect Dumpling. Zichen guessed what she wanted to do. He said hesitantly. She was probably no match for Yi Wentao alone. Chu Luiyue had already turned her head and looked at Yi Wentao. Clang! She suddenly smashed the armillary shield in her hand to the ground. Digression, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1965. Yi Wentao's eyes lit up. Is she finally going to use it? However, Chu Luiyue's next move disappointed him greatly. She let go of the armillary sky shield, as if she had no intention of using it. Then, Chu Luiyue stabbed the red cloud sword into the ground. A crack spread on the ground. Yi Wentao was even more confused. Is Chu Luiyue not going to continue the fight? But judging from her expression, it was clearly not. Whoosh! A red stream of light suddenly flew out. A red scroll floated quietly in front of Chu Luiyue. Nan Hetian's eyes widened almost immediately. Flowing cloud flying diagram. As soon as he finished speaking, the faces of the Nan clan members became extremely ugly. At first, they were not sure, but Nan Hetian followed Nan Yifan all the time and was most familiar with this. Since he had said so, it must be the flowing cloud flying diagram. Not only did Sheng Wanyu capture Luo Yan and the others, but she also took the flowing cloud flying diagram. Someone could not help but exclaim in shock. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually not that surprising. This thing had always been under Nan Yifan's care. This time, when Nan Yuxing and the others came to the Peach Blossom dock, Nan Yifan secretly handed the flowing cloud flying diagram to them out of worry. But now, Nan Yuxing was dead, and the remaining elders were either dead or betrayed the Nan family. It was not surprising that the flowing cloud flying diagram ended up in Chu Luiyue's hands. However, this thing was after all the Nan family's most precious treasure. Now that it was taken away by Chu Luiyue, the Nan family members naturally did not feel good. Nan Hetian took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Don't worry, it belongs to the family head. She can't use it. Whoosh! Chu Luiyue waved her hand gently, and the flowing cloud flying diagram instantly spread out. Nan Hetian choked, and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. His eyes were full of shock. The remaining Nan family members did not have any better reactions. Looking at her, could it be that she had really taken the flowing cloud flying diagram for herself? However, Nan Yifan was still breathing. The moment Yi Wentao saw the flowing cloud flying diagram, a rare look of surprise flashed across his face. He and Nan Yifan could be considered old acquaintances, so he was very clear about how much Nan Yifan valued this treasure. If he wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, he probably wouldn't have taken it out. Who would have thought that in the end, Chu Luiyue would benefit? But most importantly, Chu Luiyue seemed to know how to use the power of this thing. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Yi Wentao saw Chu Luiyue reach out his hand. Her fingers were slender and fair, like the finest jade. Then, she tapped lightly on the flowing cloud flying diagram. Her actions were done casually, with an air of nonchalance and nobility. It was as if he did not care about what was happening in front of him. In the next moment, a stream of light flew out and quickly formed a huge Xian formation in midair. For symbols formation. Although Yi Wentao wasn't a Xian master, he was quite knowledgeable about Xian formations, so he immediately recognized this Xian formation the moment he saw it. The scene in front of him caused his pupils to shrink slightly. Just now, Chu Luiyue just lightly touched it, and she managed to form this Xian formation. No. This Xian formation came from the flowing cloud flying diagram. Even a true Grandmaster Xian master wouldn't be able to successfully activate the four symbols formation in such a short period of time. The only explanation was that this was engraved on the flowing cloud flying diagram. She only needed to inject a little force to activate it. Everyone in the Nan family was also stunned. There's a Xian formation in the flowing cloud flying diagram? For thousands of years, the flowing cloud flying diagram had been placed in the Nan family, and it was inherited and safeguarded by the successive patriarchs. Because the Nan family rarely interacted with other aristocratic families, and Nan Yifan himself was extremely powerful, the number of times he used the flowing cloud flying diagram could be counted on one hand. In many people's minds, the flowing cloud flying diagram was used to save lives, and it was only responsible for quickly bringing people away at a critical moment. This included many members of the Nan family. At this moment, watching Chu Luiyue summon an extremely high-level Xian formation from the flowing cloud flying diagram, the Nan family was stunned. Immediately after, without waiting for them to react, they saw Chu Luiyue's jade-like fingers land a few dots on the flowing cloud flying diagram in succession. One Xian formation after another appeared in succession. Furthermore, the lowest level was actually at the Grandmaster level. These Xian formations quietly suspended in midair, and very quickly, they formed a unique Xian formation barrier in front of Chu Luiyue. What was even more terrifying was that the number of Xian formations was still increasing. All kinds of Xian formations surged out one after another, and a powerful aura spread out from above. Yi Wentao's god realm started to faintly tremble. Sensing this, Yi Wentao's heart uncontrollably surged with a trace of uneasiness. One had to know that a Grandmaster Xian master was able to fight with a venerable god expert. And now, just based on the dozens of Xian formations in front of him, about half of them were at this level. This was almost equivalent to several great Grandmasters fighting against him. He subconsciously turned his head and glanced at Nan Yifan. At this moment, Nan Yifan was in a half-alive, half-dead state, and was completely unaware of all this. Yi Wentao was both shocked and furious. He looked at Chu Luiyue again as if he was looking at a monster. At this moment, he finally confirmed one thing: Nan Yifan was not the true owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram at all. Otherwise, it was impossible for Nan Yifan to not react at all when Chu Luiyue caused such a huge commotion. Furthermore, it was possible that even Nan Yifan did not know that the true flowing cloud flying diagram was actually like this. If he had known and told Nan Yuxing, he would not have fallen to his current state. In other words, the flowing cloud flying diagram that the Nan family had treasured and preserved for thousands of years had never truly belonged to them. Instead, it had become Chu Luiyue's object by chance. Chu Luiyue's eyes were burning as she stared intently at Yi Wentao, who was standing in front of her. Then, she suddenly activated the power in her body and shouted, "Go!" As her voice fell, the dozens of Xian formations slowly and firmly surrounded Yi Wentao. Violent energy wreaked havoc, and wherever it passed, the green god realm collapsed inch by inch. Digression: I hope that everyone will be reunited and safe during the Lantern Festival. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1966. The God Domain, which was originally extremely sturdy and oppressive, started to crumble uncontrollably. In just a short while, those Xian formations were like a dazzling giant net, closing in on Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao's expression changed drastically. Even if he was a top-notch supreme god expert, it was impossible for him to deal with the siege of so many Xian formations at the same time. He quickly circulated the force in his body, and the totem on his forehead flashed. A figure that was almost identical to him appeared in front of him. Then, the figure started to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to the height of Yi Wentao and the other two. The eyes of the god body had a deep, dark blue color. Cold and disdainful. Divine body of 8 directions. Nan Suwai murmured as he stared at the divine body. Yi Wentao's divine body was extremely rare, and its combat power was extremely strong. It was rumored that the divine body of 8 directions was created by the family Yi's ancestors, and only members of the family Yi could cultivate it. However, because it was extremely difficult to cultivate, there were not many who could actually succeed. Most members of the family Yi would choose to cultivate other divine bodies after they failed. And once it was successful, the strength of the cultivator would greatly increase. This was also why Yi Wentao was able to sit firmly in the position of family Yi for so many years, and he had absolute authority in the family. Nan Suwai had only heard of it before, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. He did not expect to see Yi Wentao summoning the divine body of 8 directions at this moment. Then, under everyone's gaze, the divine body took a step forward, raised its hand, and punched out. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings surged madly and gathered into a huge gust of wind from the fist. Yi Wentao's mind moved, and the gust of wind from the fist swept out. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The divine body of 8 directions smashed the Xian formation at the front with its fist. That Xian formation instantly shattered into countless pieces, shining faintly and scattering in all directions. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly, and his finger quickly slid across the flowing clouds flying diagram. Those streams of light seemed to have sensed something and surged over. Like raindrops falling into the sea, they were quickly annihilated. Chu Luiyue lowered her gaze to take a look. The small square where the profound formation was located originally had a brilliant color, but at this moment, it had already dimmed quite a bit. It could be seen that Yi Wentao's attack had a huge impact on the profound formation. Fortunately, after this destroyed profound formation returned, although it was greatly damaged, it continued to absorb the surrounding energy of heaven and earth, using it to replenish its own strength. Seeing the color slowly returning, Chu Luiyue let out a long sigh of relief. The Xian formation on the flowing cloud flying diagram could be summoned multiple times. Even if it was destroyed by force, as long as there was enough heaven and earth energy to replenish it, there would still be a day when it could be restored. However, it might take a little longer. Yi Wentao destroyed a profound formation with a single punch, causing everyone's expression to change. As expected of the divine body of 8 directions. It really lives up to its reputation. Nan Suwai looked at Chu Luiyue with a slightly worried expression. Although she had the flowing cloud flying diagram in her hand, her realm was still far from Yi Wentao's. There was a huge gap between the two of them, and it wasn't that easy to cross it. Yi Wentao wasn't that easy to deal with. Sheng Jing and the rest were also watching the situation on the stage closely. Zhao Song couldn't help but say, "Brother Shengguan, Yi Wentao's divine body of 8 directions is a top-notch divine body in the world. It's said that the last time he publicly summoned the divine body of 8 directions was a few decades ago. It's really amazing that your little girl could force him to this extent in such a short period of time. But then again, now that he's going all out, I'm afraid your little girl will be in danger." Yi Wentao was a ruthless character. Since he dared to come this time, he must have great confidence. After not seeing him for so many years, his divine body of 8 directions had become even stronger. The Peach Blossom Dock was such a good place. If he really had to give it up because of this loss, even he couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Sheng Jing placed his hands behind his back and squinted his eyes slightly. Yi Wentao is indeed powerful, but isn't someone to be trifled with either. His tone was calm, but it was filled with great confidence. It was as though he was certain that Chu Luiyue would win this round. Zhao Song turned around and exchanged glances with the rest behind him. They could see that Chu Luiyue was indeed very powerful, but compared to Yi Wentao, she was still lacking, right? This divine body of 8 directions, boom. Another violent shattering sound was heard. The second Xian formation was forcefully destroyed by Yi Wentao's divine body of 8 directions. The atmosphere among the crowd seemed to have become even more tense. The Xian formations were shattered one after another, but Chu Luiyue remained standing on the same spot, as though she didn't have any reaction. She looked ahead quietly, and her beautiful face was filled with calmness. Waves seemed to be surging in that pair of deep, black eyes, as though she was thinking about something. Seeing that Yi Wentao was like a hot knife through butter, many people started to get anxious. What exactly was Chu Luiyue planning to do? She couldn't possibly be prepared to admit defeat just like that, right? Yi Wentao looked on coldly, and a mocking smile flashed across his face. The flowing cloud flying diagram was indeed powerful. Chu Luiyue was able to take it for herself and comprehend the mystery within it. It was her ability. With this item, cultivators only needed to expend a bit of energy to trigger the Xian formation, and they would be able to unleash several times the power. It was truly a rare treasure. However, many people had neglected one thing. Even if each Xian formation only required a bit of energy to activate, these dozens of Xian formations were not a small number when put together. Chu Luiyue couldn't possibly hold on forever. Hence, as long as these Xian formations were dealt with, Chu Luiyue would be completely unable to continue the battle. Yi Wentao thought about this and began to channel his energy even more crazily. Boom boom boom. All sorts of explosive sounds could be heard. It was almost deafening. The violent energy spread in all directions. Many people hurriedly set up barriers in front of them, and with great difficulty, they managed to block the energy outside. Even so, there were still a few weaker people who couldn't withstand the pressure and spat out blood as they retreated. The Peach Blossom Cove's barrier shook again. You, Dumpling widened her eyes and wanted to go forward. Zichen frowned slightly, caught her outstretched hand, and stuffed it back. Dumpling was a small and soft person. She was easily held in Zichen's arms, and she couldn't break free. If you go over now, you'll only cause trouble for her, Zichen said lightly. Dumpling heard this and finally gave up struggling. She clenched her fists tightly and stared straight ahead. She couldn't cause trouble, she had to help Yu. Swoosh. A reddish gold flame suddenly appeared in her eyes. Almost at the same time, the sky quickly darkened. Zichen was shocked and looked up immediately. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1967. This sudden commotion caused everyone present to be shocked, and they all raised their heads to look. What's going on? Is someone about to break through? Or, is it because those two are fighting? It doesn't seem like it. Everyone was talking about it, and they were all confused. Yi Wentao and Chu Luiyue had been fighting for a while. If this commotion was really caused by the two of them, it should have come a long time ago. It shouldn't have come now, right? Then, the rich energy of heaven and earth quickly formed a huge vortex and rushed down. When they saw the direction of the vortex, many people sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed to be going for the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Zichen quickly realized something and glanced at Dumpling in his arms. Dumpling looked up, and the dim light of the sky was reflected in her grape-like eyes. Zichen put Dumpling down and took a few steps back, but his eyes were still fixed on Dumpling. The moment he stepped back, the energy in the sky quickly descended and rushed into Dumpling's body. Her body was like a bottomless pit, crazily devouring all the energy around her. Chu Luiyue looked back at Dumpling, and a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. She was, swoosh. A crimson gold feather suddenly broke through the air. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She guessed right. Dumpling was preparing to open her 5th meridian. But how long had it been since she last opened her meridian? In such a short time, Dumpling was going to. Suddenly, a light flashed in her mind. Dumpling was converting the energy that Yi Wentao forced into her body into her own. That was the true power of a god. In fact, after Chu Luiyue passed the god-destroying tribulation, she noticed that Dumpling and Zichen's strength had increased a lot. This time, with the help of Yi Wentao's power, it was reasonable for Dumpling to want to break through. However, other than Chu Luiyue, everyone present had never personally witnessed the crimson gold celestial phoenix meridian opening. Therefore, when the golden feather appeared, many people were stunned. It wasn't until the feather floated in front of Dumpling that someone finally came to a realization. That's the feather of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. As soon as he finished speaking, many people finally regained their senses. Those were indeed the feathers of a scarlet gold heavenly phoenix. It was entirely scarlet gold, flickering with radiance. But why did this thing suddenly appear? Just as everyone was at a loss, the feather began to gently move in the air. At the same time, Dumpling closed her eyes and the flames around her body surged wildly. Her aura began to rise crazily. Miao Fushan was the first to recover from his shock. Is she going to open her meridians? The two ancient divine beast clans had always been in a subtle relationship of opposition and competition. Sometimes, they knew each other better than they knew each other. In addition, Miao Fushan's seniority was extremely high. He had personally witnessed the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan opening their meridians. Therefore, when he saw this scene, he immediately recognized it. His words were like a stone that fell into the lake, splashing countless waves in an instant. Everyone was in an uproar. Opening her meridians. Although this term was not common to them, it didn't mean that they didn't understand what it meant. Those present were all people with status and strength, so they basically understood what it meant. How old is that crimson gold heavenly phoenix? She's already opening her meridians? Since she has already transformed into a human form, it means that she has already opened her meridians. But the point is, why is it starting now? How many meridians has she opened? No, if she's opening her meridians, then, as the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Yi Zhao and the rest should have noticed it, right? I clearly saw that she was on the verge of dying. Why is she suddenly opening her meridians now? This contracted divine beast of Shengguanyu is as unpredictable as her. Everyone was discussing animatedly. Yi Wentao also noticed the situation here and immediately frowned. Soon, he figured out the crux of the matter and couldn't help but secretly grit his teeth. This crimson gold heavenly phoenix was really cunning. Not only was it not defeated by his power, but it also transformed into its own power and even opened her meridians directly. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Even if it's opening her meridians, it's not a big deal. How old is this phoenix? Even if it's opening her meridians, it should only be opening the 2nd meridians, the 3rd meridians at most. Even if it's successful, it can't make any waves. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he saw several golden rays appear in front of Dumpling in succession. 1, 2, 3, 4. The crimson gold feather drew the 5th meridians. Yi Wentao's brain seemed to have been hit by something and was completely stunned. The 5th meridians. Isn't this opening her 5th meridians? She's crazy. In the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, there aren't many who have opened their 5th meridians. What's more, this is an underage. His heart started to beat rapidly. I have to stop her. Otherwise, today's battle would have been really dangerous. He did as he thought. At this time, Yi Wentao had already solved the several barriers in front of him. After seeing Dumpling's movements, his mind moved, and the 8 directions godly body rushed forward without hesitation. Boom! The huge and muscular figure walked forward, leaving deep footprints on the ground as it shook. At this moment, Chu Luiyue's body suddenly shone brightly. A gorgeous light soft armor instantly covered her entire body. A terrifying aura suddenly descended upon them. Many people were shocked. Godly body. Digression, mobile users who come at 6 p.m., please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1969. Yi Wentao did not understand what Chu Luiyue meant at first. That was until he realized that the power of the profound formations was still rising. His eyes shrunk, and he then realized that Chu Luiyue was burning her own force to forcefully support these Xian formations. Not only did her origin power not burn out like he had expected, it was even abundant to the point that she was able to divert a considerable amount of energy to control these profound formations when she was fighting with his omnidirectional divine body. Countless terrifying energies came from the profound formations and began to strangle Yi Wentao. Without the protection of the omnidirectional divine body, Yi Wentao's physical strength was very limited. Even though he was a god, he did not have a divine body and could not fight against these profound formations bare-chested. There were many Grandmaster-level profound formations inside. The last remaining divine domain around Yi Wentao began to collapse. A heavy pressure fell on his body, heavy and painful. Intense pain came from every part of his body. Yi Wentao was so shocked that he could not speak. Chu Luiyue was definitely only a high god. They had fought before, so he was very sure of this. But, how did she store such an astonishing amount of origin power in her body? Even he faintly felt that he was indeed slightly inferior at this moment. Yi Wentao was not the only one who had the same question. In fact, when Chu Luiyue took action again and controlled the profound formations, almost everyone present was stunned. A cultivator's body was like a container. Every level of cultivator had a certain upper limit. Once this upper limit was exceeded, the cultivator could very well explode and die. This was the invisible barrier created by the level of strength. Normally, the origin power stored in a high god expert's body was definitely not comparable to a high god expert's. Sometimes, the difference between the two could be several times, or even 10 times. But now, everyone could see that Chu Luiyue had crushed Yi Wentao in this aspect. An endless stream of energy gushed out from her body, as if it would never be exhausted. The smug smile on Yi Wen's face suddenly froze. How is this possible? She has accumulated so much origin power in her body, but she didn't explode and die. If it were anyone else, their pill of essence and physical body would not be able to withstand it. Over at the Nan family and Family Yi's side, the originally boisterous and lively atmosphere instantly froze. Yi Wentao was thinking crazily. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He couldn't just sit there and wait for death. He was clearly aware of the consequences of being surrounded and annihilated by these profound formations if he continued to stay here. He had to avoid these troubles first. Thinking of this, Yi Wentao suddenly raised his head. With a thought, he tried to recall his omnidirectional divine body. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his palms and grabbed the divine body's wrists with both hands. Yi Wentao's heart sank. Shengguan Yu! How dare you! Chu Luiyue did not seem to hear him at all. The origin power around her surged wildly and poured into both of her palms. Then, she abruptly raised her qi and forcefully dragged the divine body into the air. Her slender and flexible waist spun. The huge divine body of 8 directions, which was several times bigger than her, was then violently flung away by Chu Luiyue. At this moment, Yi Wentao was distracted and let Chu Luiyue succeed in flinging the divine body of 8 directions far away. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy and hurried footsteps could be heard. The divine body of 8 directions left a few deep footprints on the ground before it could stabilize itself. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue was standing between Yi Wentao's physical body and his divine body. Yi Wentao gritted his teeth in hatred. Chu Luiyue was clearly doing this on purpose. Yi Wentao's anger reached its peak. The last string in his brain was stretched taut. A totem quickly appeared between his eyebrows. Then, he moved his body, intending to force his way out. At this moment, a black figure suddenly appeared behind Yi Wentao. It was Zichen. He looked at Yi Wentao with a cold and disdainful gaze, as if he was looking at an ant. Yi Wentao felt a chill at the back of his head and subconsciously turned around to look. The huge net formed by the Xian formations had surrounded almost 3/4 of the space around him, leaving only a small space behind him. However, he did not expect Zichen to appear here. Yi Wentao's intuition told him that something was wrong. Subsequently, a vast and distant howl resounded from Zichen's body. It seemed to be the cry of a legendary three-eyed eagle, but also the cry of a dragon. Then, a purple gold flowing light flew out from between his eyebrows. Chi! The sound of a sharp weapon piercing through flesh could be heard for a short while. Yi Wentao did not dodge in time, and one of his shoulders was sliced off. Blood dripped. Yi Wentao spat out a mouthful of blood, shocked and furious. You, Chi! At this moment, another clear cry of a phoenix soared into the sky. On the other side, Ancestor Golden Feather had finally completed the 5th strand. 5th meridian, open. Dumpling's aura surged. Her body was still burning with golden flames, and she looked like a ball of fire as she charged toward Yi Wentao. Leave your remaining arm to me. Chu Liuyue's figure moved, and she harshly kicked the all-directional divine body. The omnidirectional divine body immediately crossed its arms and blocked in front of it. Crack! The crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. Then, everyone saw that the omnidirectional divine body's arms were bent at an extremely strange angle. The one who lost was Yi Wentao's omnidirectional divine body. Digression, mobile users at 7 p.m. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1970. As the two exchanged blows, Chu Liuyue's divine body actually cracked Yi Wentao's omnidirectional divine body. The scene in front of them was so shocking that the expressions of the Nan family and Family Yi became unusually interesting. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that the divine body of a high god could defeat the divine body of an honorable god. Even if they told others about this, they would be treated as a joke. On the other side, Shang Guanjing and the others were also deeply shocked. Although Rong Xiu had already explained that Chu Liuyue's divine body was tempered by the god-destroying tribulation, they had only heard of it and had never seen it with their own eyes. Otherwise, no one would have recognized Chu Liuyue when he summoned his divine body. The god-destroying tribulation could only be summoned by an extremely small number of honorable gods. Those who could successfully pass it were even rarer. They did not even think about it in the beginning. If not for Rong Xiu's reminder, they would still be confused. The power of Chu Liuyue's divine body had also shocked them. This could no longer be described as simply powerful. This was clearly heaven-defying. SSS. Brother Shangguan, this junior of yours is really... Zhao Song was conflicted for a while and could not think of any words to express his feelings at this moment. In the end, he could only smile helplessly and shake his head. His eyes were filled with undisguised admiration and envy. You're really lucky. This kind of fortune was really something that others could only envy. In the Divine Ruins world, there were countless aristocratic families and clans. Every family would spend countless resources and effort to nurture the younger generation. What was the reason? Wasn't it so that the glory of the family could be passed down from generation to generation? Only when the descendants were outstanding enough would they have enough glory on their faces and the family be able to continue on. However, Chu Liuyue alone had done so much. Indeed, she was born outside the Divine Ruins world. Compared to the disciples of the aristocratic families, her starting point was much lower. However, it could not stop her from being extremely talented and destined by the heavens. Which one of the people present today was not an extremely outstanding genius when they were young? However, compared to Chu Liuyue, they were greatly inferior. Even someone like Zhao Song sighed at his own inferiority. Shang Guanjing did not say anything. His eyes were fixed on Chu Luyue, who was in the arena, and his eyes were glistening. Shangguan Jing's descendant was naturally the most outstanding. Zhao Song looked at Rong Xiu and sighed with emotion. The saint's eyes. Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly, and he happily agreed with the compliment. He had always been like that. Chu Luyue took advantage of the situation and continued forward. This time, she didn't use any divine artifacts. She just directly went up to fight. Every punch hit the flesh. The divine body and the god was passively, the god was gods as a passive as a. A series of dull thuds and the sound of bones breaking alternated. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. However, Chu Luyue's expression did not change at all from the beginning to the end. Even her eyes were filled with fighting spirit. She did not say a word. She only cared about attacking and beating up the divine body of 8 directions. On the other side, Dumpling quickly passed through those Xian formations and came to Zichen's side. She looked at Yi Wentao with a burning gaze. She licked her lips and crossed her small hands, making cracking sounds. Zichen wanted to continue, but he stopped when he heard her voice. Seeing Dumpling's eager look, Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly. Can you do it? After all, she was injured just now. Zichen meant well, but in Dumpling's ears, it was not the case. She rubbed her nose. Humph, who are you looking down on? I'll cut off one of his arms right now for you to see. Yi Wentao almost choked when he heard that. That was a great humiliation to him. Since when did he, the dignified head of family Yi, become an object for them to bet on? And they were betting on his arm. At that thought, Yi Wentao looked at his bleeding wound and gnashed his teeth in hatred. However, at that moment, Dumpling had already moved. She raised her hand, and a crimson gold flame suddenly rose from her palm. Then, with a wave of her small hand, the flame instantly transformed into a long whip and lashed wildly at Yi Wentao. Wherever the flame passed, the void collapsed one after another. Yi Wentao was shocked. A crimson gold sky phoenix who had opened the 5th meridian had grown so much in strength? In fact, although he had interacted with the crimson gold sky phoenix clan before, he did not know much about them, nor had he fought with a crimson gold sky phoenix who had opened the 5th meridian. Generally speaking, people of this level could be elders in the clan. Yi Wentao would not find trouble for no reason and offend an elder of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan for no reason. It was also because of this that Dumpling's attack was far beyond Yi Wentao's expectations. The flame came rapidly, causing the surrounding temperature to rise rapidly and become boiling hot. The sticky and sweet blood stains on Yi Wentao's body quickly dried up because of this, leaving only dark red and stiff traces of blood. Chi! The flame whip tore through the air. Yi Wentao originally wanted to forcibly take this move, but Zichen's previous attack had caused great damage to him, forcing him to choose to retreat now. However, he was fast, but Dumpling's flame was faster. The flame flashed in front of him, and Yi Wentao suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. Then, a heart-wrenching burning pain came from his other arm. It was the flame whip that was tightly wrapped around his remaining arm. Dumpling did not hesitate and pulled fiercely. The sound of blood and bone tearing could be heard. Yi Wentao did not have time to think of a way to defend himself before Dumpling tore off his arm. Now, only 2 bloody wounds were left on his shoulders. It was a ghastly sight. The thick smell of blood permeated the air, and it was almost nauseating. Dumpling waved her hand disdainfully, and then raised her head proudly. How is it? As Zichen watched, the corners of his lips suddenly curled up. Dumpling was stunned. What was he smiling about? At this moment, Chu Luyue finally stopped. The 8 directions' divine bodies had been beaten to a pulp by her and could not retaliate at all. She turned around and raised her eyebrows. Very good. Leave his life to me. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1971. As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Liuyue's figure disappeared from where she was standing. Yi Wentao instinctively turned around when he heard the sound. He saw a flash of light and shadow in front of him. Then, the void started to vibrate and ripple. A suffocating pressure came over him. The blood in his body seemed to freeze at this moment. Then, a hand suddenly broke through the void and came toward him. It was a slender and fair hand. It was covered with a layer of beautiful soft armor that glowed faintly. At first glance, it looked like a pearl or jade. Yi Wentao was stunned for a moment. Then, he was shocked. This was Chu Liuyue's hand. Sure enough, in the next moment, Chu Liuyue's figure also rushed out from behind the void. Yi Wentao immediately retreated without hesitation. However, Zichen and Dumpling were standing behind him. Where could he run to? Zichen waved his sleeve and sent out a blast of energy. It formed a translucent boundary and blocked Yi Wentao's escape route. Yi Wentao sensed the cold aura coming from behind him. He did not need to turn around to know what was going on. At this moment, he was in a dilemma. Large beads of sweat appeared on Yi Wentao's forehead. Almost instantly, his back was drenched in cold sweat. His face was pale and his lips were trembling. Before this, Yi Wentao would never have thought that he would be forced into such a corner by Chu Liyue. In fact, he did not underestimate Chu Liyue at all. All the things that had happened to her during this period of time had proven that she was definitely more difficult to deal with than the average great deity. Therefore, Yi Wentao did not care about his reputation and used his status as a great deity to half-coerce Chu Liyue into fighting with him. He thought that this would be a sure win for him. Who would have thought that? Bang! Chu Liyue punched Yi Wentao in the chest. Yi Wentao's body flew out in an instant and landed heavily on the ground. Whoosh, boom. His body left a long trail of blood on the ground as he crashed into the barrier set up by Zichen. Puff! Yi Wentao's body shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened. Patriarch. When the family Yi members saw this, they could not help but exclaim in shock. Everything happened too quickly. Zichen and Dumpling attacked one after another, followed by Chu Liyue. Everyone only felt that the scene in front of them was a mess. When they looked again, they saw that Yi Wentao had already fallen to such a state. Without his arms, his omnidirectional divine body had also been severely injured. All of this was fatal to Yi Wentao. He lay on the ground, on the verge of death. He kept spitting out blood, and he looked battered and exhausted. Chu Liyue walked up to him. When Yi Wentao heard the commotion, he struggled to get up. But now, such a simple action was already extremely difficult for him. Chu Liyue walked to him and stood still as she looked down at him. Family Yi, it looks like you're not as powerful as I thought you were. This sentence was like a slap to Yi Wentao's face. Yi Wentao raised his head with difficulty. His eyes were filled with hatred. You! Chu Liyue looked up at family Yi and the Nan family members with a half-smile. You brought so many people to openly steal my peach blossom dock. I thought patriarch family Yi was extremely powerful. I didn't expect, or did I overestimate you? Everyone was extremely aggrieved. Their faces turned pale. Yi Wentao finally couldn't help but shout. Shengguan Yu! Don't be too arrogant. You! Before he could finish speaking, Chu Liyue suddenly raised his leg and stomped heavily on Yi Wentao's chest. Crack! The sound of bones breaking. Yi Wentao's face turned red. His chest caved in. Chu Liyue's stomp had broken a few of his ribs. Yi Wentao, your brother is in such a state now. If I'm not arrogant, do you think he's the arrogant one? Why don't you ask your own brother if he can still be arrogant? Chu Liyue used a lot of force in this kick, and it directly caused the energy in Yi Wentao's body to go crazy. This forced him to be unable to say a single word. He opened his mouth and forcefully spat out a few vague and bloody syllables. Yi Wentao's face was ashen. Chu Liuyue's stomp was on Yi Wentao's body, as well as on Family Yi's head. How could they bear it? However, they had to bear it even if they couldn't. They didn't want to see the situation turn for the worse with their own eyes. At this moment, Jun Zhuqing suddenly stepped forward and said, "You've won this round. Family E is willing to accept defeat." Family E was shocked. They didn't expect Jun Zhuqing to suddenly speak at this time. One of the elders frowned and said, "That's right. Young master, family head hasn't admitted defeat. Don't you think it's a little inappropriate for you to do this?" Jun Zhuqing frowned slightly. A hint of coldness appeared in his eyes. Chu Luyue also laughed. "Yes. The one who will be competing with me is Patriarch E, not any of you present here. This sentence has to be said by Family Head Family E personally." As she spoke, she lowered her head and looked at Yi Wentao. "Family Head Family E, what do you think?" Yi Wentao's heart was filled with hatred. Of course, he didn't want to admit defeat in front of so many people. However, if he didn't admit defeat, the current situation was almost impossible to reverse. He closed his eyes and spoke with difficulty. Before he could say a word, Chu Luyue exerted force with her foot, forcing Yi Wentao to swallow the rest of his words. Intense pain came from all over his body, especially his chest. It seemed like there was a heavy weight on it, making it difficult for him to breathe and unable to say a word. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows. "Oh. It seems that Family Head Family E still doesn't want to admit defeat?" Yi Wentao's eyes rolled back and he almost fainted from anger. At this moment, everyone in the Family E also realized that the family head wasn't unwilling to admit defeat. It was clearly Chu Luyue who was deliberately preventing him from speaking. Since Family Head E is so stubborn, then I can only convince you with my strength. Chu Luyue shook her head regretfully and was about to continue. It seemed like she was really going to beat Yi Wentao to death. "Stop." Yi Wentao hurriedly spoke, shocked and angry. Who couldn't tell that Chu Luyue was doing this on purpose? She was clearly trying to kill Yi Wentao. Chu Luyue didn't stop moving. She didn't take Yi Wentao's words seriously at all. She raised her leg and took a step to the side. Then, she stepped on Yi Wentao's ankle. Crack. The sound of bones breaking was especially hair-raising. Yi Wentao didn't have any strength to retaliate. He was in so much pain that his entire body trembled. He kept vomiting blood and almost fainted. His appearance was truly miserable. Jun Zhuqing turned around and glanced at the elder who tried to stop her and sneered. "Now, do you still think that what I did just now was inappropriate?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1972. The elder's expression was ugly, but he did not say a word. Although he was embarrassed by Jun Zhuqing's public questioning, it was clearly not the time to care about this. The remaining members of the family looked at each other in dismay. In fact, Jun Zhuqing was the most suitable person to step forward in this matter. He was the young master, second only to Yi Wentao. Now that Yi Wentao was in trouble, he was the only one who could represent the family Yi. Finally, someone cupped his fists. "Young master, please step forward and save family head." As soon as this was said, many people immediately echoed this sentiment. Even Yi Wentao had to suppress the anger in his heart. Although he was Yi Wentao's younger brother, in terms of status in the family Yi, he was now inferior to Jun Zhuqing. "Zhuqing." Yi Wentao took a deep breath and urged. After all, ever since Yi Wentao was defeated, they had lost all face. The most important thing now was to save Yi Wentao. Jun Zhuqing's eyes darkened, and he took another step forward. Now that family head is unable to speak, the young master of the family Yi, Jun Zhuqing, will admit defeat on behalf of the family Yi. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows slightly, then stopped what she was doing and looked up. Just now, she had heard how those people addressed Jun Zhuqing. After not seeing him for a while, he had actually become the young master of the family Yi. Chu Luiyue was not surprised. This could only prove that Jun Zhuqing's talent and strength were more outstanding than what he had shown before. Otherwise, he would not have been able to win this position in the family Yi, which was full of talents. She looked Jun Zhuqing up and down again. You will admit defeat on behalf of Yi Wentao? Jun Zhuqing nodded. That's right. As long as you stop now and release family head safely, we will agree to any conditions. There was a small commotion in the family Yi crowd, but it quickly subsided. Jun Zhuqing's words were too big, but if they didn't do it now, there was probably no other way. At this point, they could tell that Chu Luiyue was extremely vicious and merciless. No one could say for sure what other shocking moves she could make. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation, the family Yi members chose to accept. Chu Luiyue chuckled. What qualifications do you have to bargain with me now? Yi Wentao was already in her hands. She could kill him or torture him as she pleased. Don't forget that it was your family Yi who suggested this competition. Regardless of life or death, no one was allowed to interfere. Could it be that all of you have forgotten? Jun Zhuqing frowned. Then what do you want? Yi Wentao's arms had been chopped off and he was on the verge of death. He was even lying on the ground in humiliation, allowing her to step on him. Wasn't that enough? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly as she stretched out her hand. My conditions are very simple. First, the Great Azure Sun Axe belongs to me. The expressions of the family Yi members instantly became even more unsightly. The Great Azure Sun Axe was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts, and it was also the family Yi's clan treasure. Chu Luiyue's first condition was an exorbitant demand. Wasn't it too much? Some of the Nan family members' expressions were somewhat meaningful. Anyway, their flowing cloud flying diagram had already been snatched away. If the family Yi's was also snatched away by Chu Luiyue, the losses of those two families were about the same. Although the two sides had formed an alliance for the time being, both sides had vaguely had the intention of fighting openly and covertly for thousands of years. Anyway, things had already come to this. If they could make the family Yi bleed a little, the gap between them wouldn't be too big in the future. Jun Zhuqing didn't care about the reactions of the people behind him. He nodded. Okay. Chu Luiyue didn't mean his answer. She raised her eyes and looked at the ground not far away, at the Great Azure Sun Axe that was casually thrown there during the chaotic battle. Dumpling's eyes lit up. She immediately ran over and carried the Great Azure Sun Axe. Her figure was petite, and she wasn't even as tall as the Great Azure Sun Axe. She carried it on her shoulders with her two small hands. It looked like her head was heavy and her feet were light. It made people worry that she would be swayed by this huge and heavy axe. However, Dumpling quickly used her actions to shatter everyone's false fantasies. She strode forward with her bare feet and in a flash, she arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. Her speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Such a large piece of axe was as light as a feather in her hands. Everyone looked at her with complicated feelings. As expected of the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her physical strength was really strong. That's right. She was able to break Yi Wentao's arm with a whip. What was this axe to her? Ah, you. Here. Dumpling excitedly ran in front of Chu Luiyue and handed over the Great Azure Sun Axe. At this moment, it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Waves of cold air spread out from it. This was the mark left behind by Zichen's previous attack. Chu Luiyue took the Great Azure Sun Axe and patted Dumpling's head with praise. Dumpling is awesome. After receiving the praise, Dumpling was elated. She proudly turned her head and raised her small face at Zichen. Her intention to show off couldn't be more obvious. Look! At the crucial moment, he still had to rely on her. Chu Luiyue glanced at Dumpling and lovingly rubbed the back of her head. After all, she was still a child. She even rushed to run errands. Didn't you see that Zichen didn't move from the beginning? He didn't plan to move at all. Yet, this child was still so happy. Chu Luiyue sighed silently in his heart. Probably because she was bullied by Zichen in the heavenly square cauldron, Dumpling now wanted to compete with Zichen whenever she encountered a problem. Zichen stood on the spot and calmly nodded. Okay, you win this time. Dumpling put her hands on her waist. Wahahaha, I knew it. I'm the best. Chu Luiyue, Zichen, everyone. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling sympathetically. She didn't know how much work she would have to do in the future when she encountered an opponent like Zichen. She coughed, looked away, and looked at Yi Wentao. Family head Yi, you don't have any objections, right? How could Yi Wentao say no? He closed his eyes and nodded with difficulty. Chu Luiyue smiled. Family head Yi is indeed generous. My second condition is actually very simple. I want 30 venerable divine artifacts. Digression, insomnia, I'll take a break. I'll come back at 6 p.m. Woo-woo, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1973. Yi Wentao's face flushed red. He widened his eyes and stared at Chu Luiyue. Although he didn't say anything, his reaction was enough to show his attitude. Yi Wentao couldn't help but shout. Shengguan Yu. You're too greedy. 30 venerable artifacts? Why didn't she rob them? Chu Luiyue clicked his tongue and looked regretful. Family Yi, it seems that in your brother's eyes, your life isn't as important as those dead objects. Yi Wentao trembled with anger. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I say that? You're the one who's greedy and demanding an exorbitant price. Do you know how much 30 venerable artifacts are worth? Chu Luiyue looked like she was smiling, and her eyes were filled with coldness. Oh. If that's the case, then, do you know how much my peach blossom dock is worth? This question immediately made Yi Wentao speechless. The rest of the people who wanted to argue and criticize him also shut their mouths. The scene fell into an eerie silence. 30 venerable artifacts were indeed a sky-high price, but it was not on the same level as Peach Blossom Dock. Venerable artifacts could be made as long as there were venerable artificers. As for the number, it was just a matter of time. It was worth noting that Shengguan Jing alone had many venerable artifacts that had survived. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to give away so many at once during Rongxiu's wedding. Therefore, for someone like Family Yi, who had a strong foundation, they could definitely afford 30 venerable artifacts. However, it would cost them a lot. However, a place like Peach Blossom Dock was even more precious. It could only be found by chance. Otherwise, it wouldn't have attracted so many aristocratic families over thousands of years to try to take it under their command. Wasn't Family Yi's whole family here for this? At the end of the day, they were the ones who first tried to snatch Chu Luiyue's Peach Blossom Dock. Now that Chu Luiyue had won the bet and had the upper hand, it seemed there was nothing wrong with making such a request. The two sides fell into a short standoff. Chu Luiyue looked relaxed. The reason she wanted these things was simple. The Yu residence has just been established, so there isn't enough stock. There were quite a lot of natural treasures here, and there were also many experts who came to seek refuge. However, there were almost no divine artifacts that could be taken out. Although Chu Luiyue was a weapon refiner herself, it was impossible for her to support the entire Yu residence by herself. Now that there was ready-made wool, it would be a waste not to harvest it. What a great opportunity! Chu Luiyue felt that he had asked for too little. However, considering that Yi Wentao had already lost both his arms and was basically half dead, she decided to give him a discount. After all, she sincerely wanted to complete this deal. She had to show them her sincerity, right? If Family Yi knew what Chu Luiyue was thinking, they would probably vomit blood in anger. Jun Zhiqing turned around and looked at everyone. Elders, what do you think? Everyone groaned inwardly. What else could they do? Could it be that they could refuse? The head of the family was still in Chu Liuyue's hands. Moreover, according to the agreement between the two sides, even if she really killed Yi Wentao today, family Yi had no right or position to hold her accountable. After a while, someone finally said, "As long as we can save the head of the family, we will do whatever it takes." The rest of the people chimed in and expressed their agreement. Jun Zhiqing's gaze swept across them before he looked at Chu Luyue again. "I can agree to your two conditions on behalf of family Yi. You don't be in such a hurry. I'm not done yet." Chu Luyue interrupted Jun Zhiqing with a smile. "Thirdly, from now on, family Yi must avoid anyone from the Yu residence if they encounter anyone from the Yu residence. If family Yi uses today's incident as a reason to provoke the Yu residents in the future, I'll kill whoever comes. If two come, I'll kill both." She raised her chin as she spoke. "To prevent anyone from going back on their word, I'll have to trouble you to personally write a post as proof." Family Yi was stunned. They never expected Chu Luyue to make such a request. Jun Zhiqing reacted quickly. He pursed his lips and finally chose to agree. "Sure." Then, he took out a pen and paper from his universe ring and began to write. Family Yi watched him write with complicated expressions. Object? What about Yi Wentao? Agree? This matter was truly too aggrieving. They had thought that they would return victorious today. Who would have thought that they would end up like this? This level of humiliation was akin to ceding territory as compensation. The atmosphere on family Yi's side was oppressive and tense. Everyone's expression was extremely ugly. Today was a day of humiliation for the entire Yi family. Jun Zhiqing finished writing quickly and flicked his wrist. The piece of paper quickly flew toward Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue raised her hand to catch it and scrutinized it. Jun Zhiqing did not have any ulterior motives this time. He had written everything according to her instructions. Chu Luyue nodded in satisfaction. "Can you let her go now?" Jun Zhiqing asked. "Don't be hasty. There's still one last step." Chu Luyue smiled unhurriedly. "This piece of paper without a signature is useless." Jun Zhiqing frowned slightly. "I've already written my name on it." He was the young master of family Yi. Moreover, with Yi Wentao's current state, he would probably give up the position of the family head soon. When that time came, Jun Zhiqing would directly take over the entire family Yi. It would be the same if he was in charge. However, Chu Luyue wanted more than that. Whoever provoked today's matter will be responsible. As Chu Luyue spoke, she suddenly raised her hand. Something flew over from the side. It was an arm that had been cut off. Everyone present could see that it was Yi Wentao's arm. Just as everyone was shocked and confused, wondering what Chu Liuyue's intentions were, they saw a light and shiny dagger suddenly appear in Chu Liuyue's hand. Then, she flicked her wrist and the dagger flew out quickly. A finger was silently cut off and flew towards Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue caught the severed finger and then printed a bright red fingerprint on the piece of paper. Then, she threw the severed finger aside and took out a white handkerchief to wipe her hand carefully. Then, she burned the handkerchief. The whole process was smooth and smooth. It was as if it was not a severed arm or finger, but an unrelated object. Finally, she shook the contract and scrutinized it before nodding in satisfaction. "It's done." As she spoke, she took a step back and bowed slightly with a smile. Family Yi, thank you very much. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.